Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Your attention up front, please. My name is Mark DiSalvo. I serve as elected town moderator. Welcome to the annual town meeting of the town of North Andover, first established in 1646. I call to order the 2022 session of town meeting. Masks are encouraged when not speaking. A separate mask area is set aside in this room, and a must mask and socially distanced area is in the cafeteria with full participation. Although we are having a couple of technical snits right now, we'll work them out over the course of the opening here. I thank you for respecting those of our neighbors who are apprehensive about large gatherings and who are now able to participate in town meeting. Most importantly, for the people in this room, I want to point out that there are multiple exits for your safety at either end and at every corner of the building. The same exists in the cafeteria, where we have the must mask and the must social distance area. This is the 376th annual North Andover Town Meeting. Each year I try to highlight a stitch in the fabric of our community, somebody or group deserving of notice and applause. And this year I want to underscore both an historic and contemporary suture. We live in a world where we can thankfully, and I hope earnestly, appreciate the practice of direct participatory democracy. In Ukraine, right now, we see brave citizens fighting to save their young democracy against criminal assault by a corrupt Russian leader. They suffer those people's blood and displacement to preserve the privileges we here in this room have enjoyed for hundreds of years. Directly in front of us, and I invite folks to come up now, if you don't mind, to the front of the stage. Directly in front of us, hobbling up first and then walking up, is Nat Stevens, Stephen and Brendan Foster, Catherine, Sarah, Cheryl, and Laura Farnham, and Beth Barker as representatives of the Osgood, Stevens, Barker, Foster, and Farnham families who founded this community by leaving England to seek personal liberty. Joining them are much newer members of our community representing the Ukrainian diaspora. Ukrainian native Gloria Hersom, raise your hand, Gloria, thank you, and her husband Peter, and children Clara, Jackson, and Gabriel, each North Andover Public School students who are, and Kevin, thank you, who are this week are celebrating the anniversary of their family's emigration to America from Ukraine. We welcome the old and the new North Andover with gratitude for what they created and for what we hope and should pledge to continue to evolve. Welcome each. For those who are able, I invite you to please stand as these good families, just introduced, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And I ask you that we pay particular attention to the last 6 words, with justice and liberty for all. Ladies and gentlemen, please lead us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very, very much. And I appreciate you coming. To those who are founding families and to those new founders, every blessing to you. By show of your voting card, may I ask how many have been to town meeting in previous years? Well, that is a significant ultra majority. Thank you. So in the interest of brevity, I will dispense with most of my usual niceties and introductions, review of rules and conduct, and I'll bring them up as necessary. I do want you to know that I have sworn an affidavit that I have no conflict of interest on the matters before us this evening, have taken no public position on the articles, and will perform my duties fairly and impartially. I will continue my practice to vote only to make or break a tie. Please don't do that to me, by the way. Attorney John Fooey is appointed as Deputy Moderator conducting business in the cafeteria, which is the must mask and socially distanced room. Continuing innovations from past years, we allow those observing the meeting live on TV or streaming on the internet to email and text in questions to the meeting. If you at home wish to participate, please go to the town's website, northandovermass.gov, or text to 978-216-3774. These will occasionally crawl on the screen. I'm reminded of my own cell phone to please either turn it off or turn it to silent. The first phone that we listen to, you get to buy us drinks after the meeting. I thought that'd be good enough punishment. Closed captioning is available to all if you wish to have it on your own devices. Please go to the Zoom address previously displayed on the screen and currently displayed on the screen should you wish to avail yourself of the service, either in this room, in the cafeteria, or at home. And those who need assisted hearing devices or Braille copies of the warrant, they can be accessed by asking any teller to deliver them to you. Please remember, we come together in good faith tonight, good faith to make judgments for our entire community. Sitting here, you are transformed as soon as you walk through that door from citizens to legislators. It's a very different role. Your job is to assess what is presented here tonight and to make your very best judgment on behalf of the entire community. We leave, all of us, I pray, cynicism and bad faith behind us, knowing that the magnitude of our collective efforts are quite important. Thank you in advance for choosing to respectfully participate in local democracy. I now recognize the chair of the board, the Select Board, Laura Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Moderator, Laura Bates, 26 Woodbridge Road, Chair of the Select Board. I move that this meeting dispense with the reading of the warrant and with the reading of the constable's return of service of that warrant. I further move that the moderator not be required to read articles of the warrant verbatim, but be allowed to refer to articles by number and by subject matter, and further that any motion or amendments need not be read, but are to be voted upon as shown, published, or otherwise provided in print to the voters in attendance.
Thank you very much. I presume there is no discussion about this. All those in favor, please raise your red card with your banded hand. Thank you very much. All those opposed, I declare it a unanimous vote. At this moment, we're going to deal with what is called the consent agenda. Those are articles that are merely housekeeping in nature, that have no controversy about them whatsoever, but are necessary statutorily for this body to act as a legislature. So with your indulgence, I'm going to ask for unanimous consent of Articles 1, 2, 3, and 4. Do I hear a motion?
I move to adopt Articles 1, 2, 3, and 4 as printed in the warrant.
And displayed on the screen. Thank you very much. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Motion is seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, I see no cards raised. Unanimous consent was offered. We have similar consent items by grouped categories, and they're in your warrant book, and they are Articles 17, 23, and 24. May I have a motion? Just so moved.
So moved.
So moved and seconded.
Second.
The motion is made and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand and card. Thank you very much. All those opposed? I see no cards opposed. A unanimous consent was given. Lastly on the consent agenda is Article 19 and 20. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
The motion is made and seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your card. Thank you very much. All those opposed? Seeing none opposed, it's a unanimous vote. Congratulations to you. We've just dealt with a full third of the articles in our warrant this evening. Cooking with gas, which is a dangerous thing to say in North Andover, gas, considering what we went through in 2019. Now on to Article 5 in your warrant book. Is there a motion?
I move to adopt Article 5 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen.
Article 5 is moved. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is made and seconded. Do we have any discussion under Article 5? Madam Manager?
Mr. Chair, this article is also a housekeeping
Please identify yourself the first time.
Sure. Melissa
Thank you.
Rodriguez, Town Manager. This is also a housekeeping bylaw change to bring the current bylaw governing the Council on Aging into compliance with the Charter. It also brings the Council on Aging's appointment process in line with all of the other Select Boards appointed boards.
Do we have any discussion about the matter? I suspected not. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your card. You may put them down. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your card. The motion is passed unanimously as well. By the way, if there is differential in the annex room, please let us know. We'll go to Article 6. Is there a motion?
Move to adopt Article 6 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen.
The motion is made.
Second.
And I hear a second. Have we any discussion under Article 6?
Mr. Moderator, this is another housekeeping article that would bring the town's disposal of surplus property bylaw in line with state law. Currently, our bylaw is so restrictive that the town needs permission to throw away even valueless property.
Any discussion or queries by anybody? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your card. You may put them down. All those opposed? I declare it a unanimous vote as well. Thank you very much. We will now move to Article 7. Is there a motion, please?
I move to adopt Article 7 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen, and to authorize the Select Board to appoint a steering committee to make recommendations.
Unnecessary. All you have to say is, I move.
I move to...
Thank you. As printed and displayed.
As printed and as displayed.
Thank you very much. Is there a second to that motion? Before we move to the matter, I'm statutorily required and by practice to ask the recommendation of several committees, both elected officials and appointed committees. The first is the Select Board's recommendation. Is there a recommendation by the Select Board?
Yes, we recommended favorable action.
Okay. Is there a recommendation by the Planning Board, who are sitting behind the Finance Committee? You need to...
The Planning Board recommends favorable action.
The Planning Board recommends favorable action. And lastly, the Finance Committee, to my left.
The Finance Committee recommends favorable action.
Okay, so we have all of the obligations out of the way. Is there a short explanation?
Mr. Chair, there is a presentation by DPW Director Jim Stanford.
Please, come on up, Jim. You're welcome to either do it from there or from your call. All right. Please identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jim Stanford, Public Works Director. As mentioned, I'm here to explain...
Excuse me a moment. Can everybody hear and understand him? We can. Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead.
I do have a brief presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. The answer was no. Why don't you come up here, please? And we're going to advise people when you do come to the microphones to speak very, very closely into the microphones, okay? Thank you very much. And our sound folks will take care of you. Make sure the blue button is on. The blue light is on. Got it. Thank you. Go ahead, sir. Nope.
Let's try it again.
That's it.
Thank you again, Mr. Moderator. Jim Stanford, Public Works Director. Article 7 is for acquisition of 400 Great Pond Road. I do have a brief presentation just to explain why this is important to the town. It's a property of approximately 7.8 acres. It's abutting the lake. It has the unique distinction of having the only house in the lake. That's why it's important to us. Slide 2, as you can see, we're requesting $1.7 million, and that's from the Water Enterprise Fund. So there is no tax impact to that. It's the operating, it's not the general fund, it is the enterprise fund. I should note that the property just came on the market earlier this year. It is a property that the Water Department has been looking at for a number of years, mostly because it is in the lake. The stone foundation actually allows water to go in and out of the lake, and it actually floods the basement of this property, and that is a concern to the town. Essentially, we have to lower the lake whenever it does rise up into this basement, which means that we're actually controlling the lake for the entire town based on one property. Essentially, there are two primary reasons why we think this property is important to the town. The first being is water quality. Essentially, inside the basement, there is an oil heating system. There's also, they store chemicals, household cleaners, anything that anybody else would sell in their keep in their basement. And it's a heightened concern because if you can see on the map, essentially the water intake for the water treatment plant is right in front of this property. So essentially, if there was any type of contamination that got into the water, into the lake itself, it absolutely would make it into the water system. We do have a good water treatment plant. We would try and filter out, but that is a concern from water quality. From water quantity standpoint, as I mentioned, we have to lower the lake even during high flows going into the summer, which is a concern for us. We would much rather manage the lake based on our needs. Essentially, the water use for the town doubles during the summer months. It would just be nice if we could keep the water level at a higher level going into this high flow and high use period. I do want to be clear about this. It's not that we have an issue with the amount of water we have in town. It's just that it would be a better management if we could actually keep the water level going into the higher, into the summer months. There are several benefits to purchasing this property. As I mentioned, it would allow us to manage the lake based on our needs and the weather conditions. We could also turn it into open space. We could, there are a number of things that we could do. Essentially, we would look to eliminate the oil and any other chemicals that were into the house itself. As far as the lake itself, it would be protecting 700 feet of lake frontage. So it is pretty important to the town water system. The more frontage that we can protect, the better off we'll be from a water system standpoint. Next. The reason we didn't have a plan as to what the overall use for the property would be is because it did just come on the market. So the motion itself does include the motion that the Board of Selectmen would appoint a steering committee to actually look at the options that you could do with the lake itself. And then, you know, there are a number of things that you could do with it. You could keep it as open space. You could actually move the house or relocate the house. You could sell the property if you needed to, the remainder lot. But bottom line is, we feel that there are a number of different options you could do, and that would be the job of the steering committee. With that said, we can't take any of those benefits unless the town owns the property. With that said, I thank you, Mr. Moderator. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this.
Thank you very much. If I might invite you to stay in case there are some questions. I made my first mistake of the evening. I want you to know I neglected to tell the timekeeper to put 5 minutes on the clock, but Jim clocked in at 4 minutes and 53 seconds, so I appreciate it. Didn't cause me any heartache. Do we have any queries from anybody? Please?
Mr. Moderator, Robert Ercolini, 195 Bridle Path.
Welcome. Gentlemen, 2 minutes on the clock for everybody who comes to the microphone on the floor. Please, sir.
Okay. My question is this to allow the town to grow so that we can raise the level of the lake? And what impact does that have to property owners around the lake?
Okay, the question is through the moderator. Do you have an answer to the gentleman's query?
Yes, so as I mentioned, we do have sufficient water. So no, it's not intended for any future development. It's just more or less managing the lake properly for our benefit going into the summer months. I should mention, during the summer months, the use doubles. So it goes from about 3.5 million gallons per day to almost 7.5 million gallons per day. And that's mostly because of irrigation use. So if we ran into a drought condition, we could implement a ban like a lot of other communities. We haven't had to do that. So no, it's not because we think that we're going to need the water in the future, although we can never say. If we get into a drought, if we get into high fire flows, I can tell you during the gas emergency, we were concerned about being able to provide enough water, mostly for the treatment side, but those are always a concern.
So the alternative is...
Excuse me, sir. Directed to me. Go ahead.
Surely, Mr. Moderator. As a selectman, I remember when we were doing the water treatment plant, we had to look at the possibility to connect to the Merrimack River as the only alternative to our lake. I'm just concerned that if we're banking on raising the lake to prevent the need in the future to connect to the Merrimack River, have we got plenty of water to do 10 or 15,000 more housing developments in town? What level do we have to know before we would have to connect to the lake, a river?
Thank you, sir. And does anybody wish to answer that question or able to answer that question?
I don't think I can answer on connecting to the lake because that's not, to the Merrimack River. That's not something that we've investigated, at least within the 5 years. I can tell you that we are looking at agreements with other communities, such as Andover, under an emergency situation. We do have a couple of shutoffs between the communities. So long-term, that's a long-term select board goal. So we are looking at that. Again, it's more for during droughts. It's not for future development. And I would like to clarify, it's not that we're raising the lake. The lake rises and falls based on weather conditions. It's really, are we going to open up the hatch and let 180 million gallons go out to the ocean? That's essentially why we're talking about this tonight.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other queries? Sir?
Ron Carpenito, 34 West Woodbridge Road.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a quick question. I believe the valuation of this home that we're willing to vote on tonight is about 1.7. These people have their home on the market for much higher. Have we talked to the homeowner about purchasing their home? Are they on board with this? Are we going to be displacing people and taking their property is what I'm concerned about.
I'm quite certain that the town manager will put an offer in front of them they cannot refuse. Do you have a query or an answer to the gentleman?
Mr. Moderator, we do not have any plans to take this property by eminent domain. We are still currently negotiating with the homeowner.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no other queries. I think we're ready for the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented and displayed on the screen, please raise your red card. Thank you very much. You may put them down. All those against the motion, please raise your red card. I declare it an overwhelming two-thirds vote, and I thank you. We'll move on to the next article. Article 8. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move to adopt Article 8 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen.
Thank you very, very much. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
The motion is made and seconded. I have one recommender. Mr. Roach? Thank you. Who will identify himself in a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Roach, 200 Coachman's Lane. I currently serve as the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. As you may be aware, this parcel was originally acquired using Community Preservation Act funds. At our most recent meeting, the Community Preservation Committee discussed the matter and took a vote in the recognition of gaining public access to this parcel. We recommend favorable action.
Thank you very much. And I think we have a presentation from the town manager.
Very brief, Mr. Moderator. Just want to give people an understanding.
5 minutes on the clock, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just want to give people an understanding of where this property is located. It's the blue highlighted parcel directly to the left of the North Parish Church. See it again here. It's basically covered with the trees, again to the left of the North Parish Church. This is the view from the street. You can see the fence. And this is the view if you're looking over the fence at the parcel. It's located on Academy Road. It was purchased by Center Realty Trust in 2015 as part of an acquisition of 3 parcels around the common. Through CPC funding, we purchased a conservation restriction on the parcel as well for $570,000. It's approximately 0.628 acres. After working with members of the CPC and Center Realty Trust, it became apparent that there was a mutual goal to create public access to this parcel. Center Realty Trust has agreed to gift the parcel to the town so that we can physically open it up to the public by removing the fence and creating access through the stone wall. Today, we're asking town meeting to give the select board the authority to accept that donation and authorize the select board to assign our conservation restriction that we currently hold to a third party. We're currently in conversations with Greenbelt. We cannot both own the property and own the CR because they would merge and the CR would go away. Again, that's a conservation restriction. One of the terms that Greenbelt has come forward with is that they would not want a parking lot on the site. Just to run forward quickly what we would be responsible for, we would be responsible for tree trimming, mowing, and if a parking area was ever erected, putting an 8-foot tall fence erected with screening. When we put out the conservation restriction back in 2015, we did it to protect the scenic views, the historic landscape, for the protection of ecological, educational, and recreational values, and to further the 2010 open space plan. We are not allowed to build on it, we cannot dump, we cannot mine, and we cannot have motorized vehicles. But we can have trails for passive use, have passive recreational uses, parking as we mentioned, and we are allowed to do vegetation management, including some mowing. The public has those same rights, the right to pass by foot for purposes of quiet outdoor recreation during the day in the confine of the trails, as long as they're not in a non-construction easement, which I'm going to show you momentarily. Dogs are also allowed on site. And no one is allowed on that red site, and we will survey the property and do a title before we would accept it. And that is all, Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any queries about the donation of property? I see none. None in the other room. Are you in? Okay, I don't see you here. We have a recommendation from the planning board.
Sorry, the planning board recommended favorable action.
Okay, is there any other board that wishes to make a recommendation? Thank you very much. I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your red card. Thank you very much. All those opposed? An overwhelming unanimous vote, so it appears, and will so record it unless objection. We will now discuss Articles 9, 10, and 11 together, but we will vote on them separately. Understood? So we'll go immediately to Article 9, and may I hear a motion, please?
I move to adopt Article 9 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen.
Thank you very much.
Second.
And the motion is made and seconded. I think we have a short explanation from the town manager.
We do, Mr. Moderator.
Yours
Thank you.
will become a very familiar voice by the end of this
okay.
evening. I
These
think
are...
you need to speak right into it.
Sure, is that good?
Yes, thank
These
you.
articles would withdraw the entire police department at all ranks from civil service. Town meeting adopted civil service in 1928 for police officers, and police officers and firefighters are the only civil service government employees left in town. Civil service is a unit within the state's Human Resources Division, which is responsible for testing job applicants through a written exam only, and for those seeking promotions, and then creating lists for the town for us to choose from. Civil service does not pre-screen candidates for disqualifying matters, and requires the town to extensively document why a candidate is not selected for appointment, which is then subject to a time-consuming appeal. We have no ability to pre-screen candidates per the state's regulation. By leaving civil service, the town takes control of the hiring and promotion process. We will create a unique testing process that will be tailored to North Andover rather than a generic multiple-choice test that is given statewide. We will have a bigger candidate pool with greater flexibility. In past years, we have exhausted the list, and now we would have the ability and the control to create a new list when needed. We would no longer have to hire off of other communities' layoff lists, accept lateral candidates, or other statutory preferred candidates from other communities. We also would have the flexibility to allow our police command staff to participate in the hiring promotional process, which we cannot do now. We would still have preferences for local candidates and veterans, and could have additional preferences as the needs arise. Our employees would maintain their protections in their current rank, either through civil service or their union contract. Both the administration and the police union support vacating civil service. This does not have any effect on police reform or post standards. Other communities have left civil service recently, and the moderator will probably kill me if I read them all, but there's a good list of about 15 to 20, notably near us, including Burlington, North Reading, etc. And there are representatives from all of the police unions here today if you'd like to hear from any of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have we any questions from the floor? Seeing no questions from the floor, I think we're ready for a vote then. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please raise your card. You may put your hands down, thank you. All those opposed, please raise your card. I see an overwhelming majority, and we will now move on to Article 10. And do I hear a motion for Article 10?
I move to adopt Article 10 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen.
The motion is made and seconded.
Second.
Thank you. Do we have need for discussion? It's the same article, just a different class. Hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your red card. You may put them down. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your red card. And I declare an overwhelming majority once again that it passes. We will now move on to Article 11. Same circumstance, same argument, but first a motion, I apologize.
I move to adopt Article 11 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen.
The motion is made.
Second.
And seconded. We're getting good at this. Thank you. Are there any queries? Hearing none, I think we're ready. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your red card. You may put them down. All those opposed, raise your red card. And I declare once again another overwhelming majority. At this moment in time, I'm advised that Article 12 has been withdrawn. No action is necessary, but we'll so declare it as a withdrawn article. Article 13 is a citizen's petition. Is Mr. Melendez in the room? And I invite him to come forward. And while that may be happening, I just want to note for those of you who are in the bleachers who are getting a little tired and not having a back, you're welcome to come in and fill in spaces in any of the chairs that are on the floor. Mr. Melendez, if you please go to that microphone, I apologize. Thank you. I ask you to put 2 minutes on the clock. Sir, welcome.
Good evening.
You may remove your mask to speak, if comfortable.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. My name is Jesus Melendez. I live at 38 Phillips Court. I move Article 13 as printed in the warrant and displayed on this screen.
It is so moved. Thank you. Please continue. I'm
a proud father of two and made North Andover my home 4 years ago. I work as an EMT at Lawrence General Hospital and have gained valuable experience working there. I have had the opportunity to work alongside elite professional North Andover firefighters and admire the professional service they provide to their community. It will be an honorable privilege to join the prestigious fire department. I would appreciate the opportunity to serve and protect the residents of North Andover. Thank you for your time.
You're very, very welcome. And thank you for being very efficient as well. Are there any questions for Mr. Melendez or about the article? It's something that we have typically done, not always, but typically done. Are we ready for a vote? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your red card. You may put them down. All those against the motion, please raise your card. I see it and declare it a unanimous vote. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
So in normal days, this would be the show, but we're going to move to Article 14, Appropriation, through all of our financial articles. May I have a motion on Article 14, please?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, Donovan O'Connell, 88 Green Street. I move to adopt Article 14 as printed in the warrant.
The motion is made. May I hear a second? Seconded. Thank you very, very much. We are going to have a 7-minute presentation from the town manager, and we will move to discussion thereafter. All yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Today we're talking about the fiscal year 23 capital improvement plan. A capital improvement plan is typically a 5-year plan that's created by our department heads and school committee. It's our tangible assets or projects that are valued at more than $25,000 and have more than a 5-year lifespan. The capital budget, which we're voting on today, is how we pay for 1 year of that program. For fiscal year 23, we have 25 items in different categories totaling $8,449,743. We have routine items like IT upgrades, playground maintenance, HVAC, culvert inspections and repairs, the library bathrooms. But we also have new items this year, like our Fields Master Plan, an ambulance security upgrades, and a generator for the new senior center. We're starting this town meeting with $12,961,921 worth of free cash. At the end of this town meeting, if all of the articles prevail, we will still have $5.3 million in free cash. I'll remind you that free cash goes away on June 30th and then gets recertified at the end of the summer, beginning of September, and we start again with a new free cash number. In this article, we're using $6 million in free cash, $1.6 million in retained earnings, which is like the free cash of the water and sewer enterprise funds, and $820,000 in grant funding, which is actually our Chapter 90 that we use to do streets. In the capital stabilization article, which was already voted, but I just wanted to tell you about it, we had $3.2 million there, and we're using a combination of the levy, new growth, and borrowing unused debt capacity in free cash. And in the MSBA article that you'll hear later, we have $900,000 in free cash. We're not advising using debt because we're saving that for the future facilities master plan too. Speaking of that, we're going to tell you a little bit about that today. We're kicking that plan off, and I'm sure you've seen our What's Up Wednesdays and our Master Plan Mondays, and everyone's been reading along, but we want to tell you a little bit about it. It does include 5 school buildings and 2 town buildings, and we really were school-focused for this plan, which we're very excited about. It really talks about building conditions, making sure that we're having equity in our educational delivery, impacting our class sizes, and really focused on understanding our enrollment projections and understanding what we're accounting for as we're moving forward. This is our recommended order of projects, and as you can see, today at this town meeting, we're dealing with the middle school design and the Kittredge School. The reason that the schools and the projects are recommended in this order is because it addresses the middle school first, reflects the possibility of MSBA funding for Kittredge, but also puts the most expensive project toward the front, which is the Kittredge, to avoid escalation. It uses our decreasing debt to our advantage by matching project costs to increased capacity. Speaking of costs, the total cost of these projects using this recommended order over a 15-year period is $167 million. That accounts for inflation of 3% for operating and 5% for construction costs per year, and it's an all-in amount. We're talking about design, technology, fixtures, future operating costs, OPEB, Medicare, employee expenses, everything it will take to get these buildings up and running. How we're going to fund it, and really we're focused on those first few years right now, but fiscal year 24 construction next year will be capacity within the levy using that debt that we've been saving for the last few years. Fiscal year 25 Kittredge will be MSBA and capacity within the levy, again capitalizing on what you've all been saving with us the last couple of years. Fiscal year 26 and will be fire station capacity within the levy in the gymnasium at the Franklin using debt capacity reserved. And how are we doing this with so few debt exclusions? And if you remember correctly, a debt exclusion is kind of like an override. We're taking it just for the purpose of the debt. It goes away at the end of the override period, requires an election, and it's twofold. We have debt decreasing. We actually have $72 million of debt coming off over the next 25 years. But over the last 3 years, we haven't taken any new debt. And so we've saved all of that in the budget rather than let it go to operating. And again, we will not have any operational overrides under this plan either because we're going to be using Amazon New Growth and watching that come on slowly and using that. My favorite slide, the 5-year increased cost to taxpayers with the MSBA to do the middle school construction, Kittredge construction, fire station construction, and Franklin Gym is $0. So to build all of those projects will have no impact to taxpayers because of how we've saved. And what's next for Facilities Master Plan 2? That's exciting. Thanks. We're kicking it off right now. Each project will need individual approvals. In this article right now is the middle school design. Coming up a little while, we'll have the MSBA article. We've already voted the capital stabilization and the consent. And again, no impact to taxes. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the floor? Are you coming to the microphone, sir? Yes, okay. While we wait for the gentleman to come to the microphone, I want to first notice that we should give appreciation to former school committee member Amy Mabley, who declined to run for re-election and for 6 years was up on this stage. Thank you for her service to our community. And most importantly, welcome to the school committee member who replaced her, Joe Hicks, who's having his virgin experience up on this stage. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, I have an amendment, a motion to...
Please bring it forward. No clock yet. Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay. You can go back. We have a motion. It's on point. We're going to try to display it for you to make an amendment to that which is in front of us. But first, we'll hear a query or a rationale for it from Mr. Ercolini. You have 2 minutes, sir.
The purpose of this article amendment is to put the town in the position of determining what happens to large parcels in North Andover. Should we pass an Article 27, 28, and 29, the value of those properties will increase dramatically, from $50 to $100 million, easily. And the point of this article is to put the town in the position that when future development is being done, we'll have the ability, on articles subject to 27, 28, and 29, to form a committee. Particularly tonight, we could form that committee with some funding that would allow us to take the property, to study it, and determine whether we want to take those properties by eminent domain. Because once the zoning is approved for these articles, they increase greatly in value. Royal Crest will increase $50 to $100 million in valuation. The ability to take that property by eminent domain and have a say in what's really going to happen is not going to be within the town's control. So the purpose of this article is to set forth for you a mechanism where we could look at these properties before we do the zoning to participate either as potentially taking the property by eminent domain and then leasing it back to users or selling it to developers that are bringing in a development that's acceptable to the town.
So, sir, I needed some time to reflect and get some counsel as well. While the gentleman is acting in good faith, it is not germane to the specific article in front of us. So I'm not going to allow such an amendment to be made. You may, however, choose to do one of two things at a later time. Bring it up in the discussion in Article 27 and 28, or ask for a sense of the meeting at a later time. But it ought not to pollute the appropriations article in front of us. I'll also remind you that the moderator's rulings under statute in Massachusetts and in case law for conduct of the meeting are not appealable. And I have so ruled, and I invite you to sit down, but you may bring it up at a future time. Thank you very much, sir. The item is over. Do we have any other discussion on the article? We have none. I think we're ready for a vote. A majority vote is required. All those in favor of Article 14, please raise your hand and card. I thank you. All those opposed, please raise your card. We see no difference in the other room. I declare the motion is passed by a strong majority. We will now move on to Article 15, report of the Community Preservation Committee.
Mr. Moderator, Brian Roach, 200 Coachman's Lane. I move that we adopt Article 15 as printed in the warrant and displayed on the screen.
The motion is made.
Second.
And seconded. And we have some statutory obligations first. I'd like to add the recommendation of the Select Board.
The Select Board recommended favorable action.
And now the opinion of the Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee recommends favorable action.
And now the opinion of the Planning Board.
The Planning Board recommends favorable action. The bullet concern that the board had has been resolved, so we support the article as written.
Thank you very much. So 3 advisory boards relative to this under statute have provided favorable action. Mr. Roach, do you have any commentary?
Yes, Mr. Moderator.
And may we have 5 minutes on the clock, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, this year the CPC is recommending 8 projects plus administrative expenses for funding in the amount of $667,129. I'll briefly discuss these projects. They are detailed a little bit in more detail in your meeting packet. The first project is $199,000 to the school department for the creation of a new home cross-country course. At the the trails surrounding the Stevens Estate and Osgood Hill, this cross-country team does not currently have a home course. This would help create one, and also use an additional parcel which was acquired using CPC funding a number of years ago. This provides a safe access for the cross-country team, so we're very supportive of it. The next project is $15,731 to the Friends of North Andover Trails for the construction of boardwalks at the Mazarenko Farm Trail Network on the Locust and Scout Trails. All trails within the town have seen an excessive amount of use through the pandemic. These boardwalks would seek to restore those trails as well as protect the watershed. Next, we have $134,289 to the North Andover Historical Society. This is for proposed restoration projects to the Johnson Cottage, as well as a historic preservation restriction on the building. This is intended to improve accessibility and usability and preserve the building for generations to come. Next, we have $89,300 to the North Andover Department of Public Works for concept design, investigations, and design work for a new boat ramp, or a rehabilitation of the existing boat ramp at Lake Achicowik. This project was actually brought forward by a resident in conjunction with the Department of Public Works. It was originally requested for $155,000. The committee elected to reduce that amount so that further study could be made. The existing boat ramp, which was the article in question that we have at the planning board, is in severe disrepair. We do not allow trailered or motorized boats on the lake currently, and that was the biggest point of discussion, to ensure that any design process that goes forward will continue to adhere to lake regulations and not allow for trailered or motorized boats. Next up, we have $100,000 to the Affordable Housing Trust for the design of 12 additional affordable housing units at the Fountain Drive property. This is if everyone knows Fountain Drive, this is the land area immediately adjacent to it. This is for design, is not for construction. We anticipate the Affordable Housing Trust to come back to us in future years to actually fund the construction of this project. Next, we have $1,100, again to the Friends of North Andover Trails, for construction of boardwalks along the trail network at 635 Osgood Street, which is a proposed trail network on CPC land. I should note in your meeting packet there is a typo on this one. These trails will allow for better, improved public access, and the bridges need to cross an intermittent stream on that parcel currently. Next, we have $50,000 to the Stevens Memorial Library for a planning and design study to improve upon the use of the north lawn, which in your packet you can see on the picture. This will be a design study to best incorporate how the library can be a good neighbor in the library district and better activate that space. Finally, we have $27,709 to the Planning Department and Trustees of Reservations. This is for the creation and repair of fencing at the entrance to Wire Hill. The existing canoe storage and boat area, people have been using it and making kind of a cut through. So this is designed to keep people a little bit further back from the water and help protect the watershed. And finally, we have $50,000 for administrative expenses. Mr. Moderator, I yield back my time.
Is there any discussion from the floor? Seeing no discussion in either room, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your card. You may put them down, thank you. All those against the motion, please raise your card. I see a near unanimous vote, not quite, and we will declare it a majority as required. Article 16, is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, move to adopt Article 16 as printed in the warrant.
A motion is made.
Second.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion? I don't see the error that I requested to add a couple of zeros to the moderator's compensation. No, huh? Okay.
I think there's an amendment on the floor, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. It will not be allowed. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your card. Thank you very much. All those opposed, raise your card. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Article 18, Appropriations. This is, go ahead. Did I miss something? No, we already did 17. Yep, Article 18. Yes.
Move to adopt Article 18 as printed in the warrant.
The motion is made. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a couple of obligations here first before we get to discussion and a presentation. The first is the recommendation of the Select Board.
The Select Board recommended favorable action.
Thank you. And now a recommendation of the Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee recommends favorable action.
Okay, we are going to enjoy a conversation about $150 million of spend, and I think we're starting with the town manager and the superintendent of schools. If we could please put 15 minutes on the clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We are presenting the fiscal year 23 budget. It is a balanced budget within capacity. It totals $124,663,538. That is an all-in amount. It includes all the transfers to stabilization accounts that we did earlier in this meeting. It includes the capital budget that we did earlier in this meeting, and it's a fully comprehensive number. The revenues for the fiscal year 23 budget total $116,527,184, a 7.47% increase from last fiscal year, not including all those free cash reserves you did earlier. Property taxes are estimated to grow by 9.75%. That's $8.136 million, with $6 million of that representing new growth. Local receipts are continuing to decrease by 0.6%. We actually are still about $460,000 from our last normal pre-COVID year, and I think we'll continue to see that for a little while. Local aid, per our policies and procedures, is level funded because the governor's budget has not yet been approved. A little bit about new growth. So new growth is what we're allowed to raise in taxes because we have new construction. Typically, we budget for between $650,000 to $700,000 each year, and this year we're seeing almost 10 times that number. Truly is extraordinary new growth. $3.6 million of that new growth is Amazon. The rest is smaller projects, and we know that the Amazon TIF is going into effect in fiscal year 24. So we're using some of this new growth for one-time projects in other articles, and we did that in the capital stabilization account. This is a graph showing you the fiscal year 23 revenue. You can see that approximately 73.5% is made up of property taxes. In fiscal year 22, the residential made up about 87% of that. This is the fiscal year 23 budget expenditures. Again, that $124 million number that matched to the revenues. This is all in with our state assessments, the capital, and the reserve transfers. This shows you our 2023 expenses. You can note that the education budget is approximately 46% here. When you include the school benefit costs as well as support services and share costs, it's more like 69%. The next biggest cost center is employee benefits, followed by capital and reserves. The fiscal year 23 budget includes an increase of 7.47% in departmental spending from fiscal year 22. Municipal departments are going up 5.78%, which is a big improvement from last year's 0.6%, which I'm sure you all remember. We're actually going back to a stable services after decreasing last year. Shared services is increasing by 10%, which sounds like a lot, but it's a very small budget, and that division decreased by almost 4% in fiscal year 22. The education budget is increasing by 5.34%. Little reminder about health insurance. We did join the GIC, which is the state health insurance program, in 2014. At that time, we were self-insured and appropriated approximately $11 million for health insurance. In fiscal year 23, 9 years later, the recommended health insurance budget is only $1 million more than that. So that really has allowed us to keep that health insurance line item fairly level. We are recommending a 6% increase, and it looks like it will be around 5.5. Town staffing is increasing this year from 210 employees to 220 employees. I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. All the costs of these employees have been accounted for, including OPEB, health insurance, workers' comp, etc. There's some minor changes in the budget outside of that. We moved some things around for efficiencies. We continue to fund the Finance Committee reserve. We have salary reserves for our unnegotiated contracts. Our COLAs, our cost of living increases are at 1.5%. We have a new part-time data collector position. We're bringing back our part-time housing specialist that we had to cut last year to reduce services. We're anticipating a mid to late fiscal year 23, fingers crossed for March, opening of the new senior center. So we have all the utilities and operating costs for that. And we're giving the festival committee a small budget so that they can continue doing all the wonderful things they're doing, like sheep sharing this Sunday. And the other thing that you'll see in this budget that we're very excited about is 4 new firefighters, 4 police officers, 1 911 communications dispatcher, which has been part of a long-term staffing goal for both departments. I'm going to very quickly run through because I'm not sure how much time I have left. But we have seen some population increases over the last 20 years. And additionally, we do have seasonal and day populations that we didn't have in the past. From 1992 to 1999, we had 44 firefighters. In 1999 was the last time we got a new firefighter. Today, we have 594 firefighters per resident, and interestingly, we have not had a new police officer or firefighter hired, an additional one, since the 2 chiefs came on the department. Our call volume has increased 22.4% from 2009 to 2019, with a 13.3% increase in EMS calls. We have 4 units at 2 stations for staffing, and we have 2 engine companies, 1 ladder truck, and 2 ambulances. Our ultimate goal is to add 4 new firefighters, to add an additional firefighter on the ladder truck for staffing. That results in 1 lieutenant and 2 firefighters on that truck at all time, which would greatly enhance the safety for both the members and the public. Due to the increase of all of our apparatus being called to different sites, the ladder truck is often responding on its own to incidents. In January alone, it was the primary apparatus at 76 incidents. There are several things that you do need 3 firefighters for that we're currently using 2 firefighters for, including carrying a ladder, extending the fly of the ladder, and recently, on January 31st, we actually only had 2 firefighters who responded to an incident, and we had to have 1 firefighter operating alone on an aerial ladder. For police, prior to 2001, we had 36 police officers. In 2001, we hired 3 additional, and that's the last time that we saw any new sworn officers added. We have 1 officer for every 792 residents, and in 2021, the police responded to 17,000 calls. We have 40 full-time sworn officers, including the chief. This chart just shows you what our force looks like compared to our comparable communities. As you can see, we have 39 officers. Billerica, which is much larger than us in population, has the exact same number. We also are asking to add 1 new 911 communication staff member. And the data here is just intense, the number of calls that they log into their system and the amount of work that they do. And in the last 2 years have begun to receive cellular calls, so if you call 911 from your cell phone, you're coming directly to North Andover and not the state police any longer. And now I'm going to turn it over to the schools.
Thank you, Madam Town Manager. Yep. Did I get off track here with my clicker?
Uh-oh. No, we're going to go back to the last presentation. You're in the right place. Yeah.
Yep. And I thought I did that. Great. I'm excited to present this year's highlights of the fiscal 2023 school budget, fiscal year. This budget reflects not only the benefits of our collaborative, responsible approach to budgeting, but it also reflects the benefits of the collaboration Melissa Rodriguez, our town manager, and I have developed, along with other government boards across town, and the commitment we all share to meet the needs of our students, staff, and families. As typical, this year's school budget was made and developed based on our strategic plan, our school committee budget directives, our long-term plan timeline, our recovery services long-term plan transition, and the FY23 recommended budget. So in FY22 this past year, we assessed the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic And we added high school positions to support a new high school schedule, along with recovery services positions. In the upcoming FY23 school year, we'll use the operating budget, along with some grant funding, for recovery services positions as we move forward in our long-term plan to FY24, where we transition from recovery to providing support positions that are part of our long-term plan. In FY25, we'll take a look at the first school projects and add the positions as we increase space capacity. FY26, we look to maintain level services between projects. And in FY27 and beyond, as future projects come online, we'll add positions as projects come to fruition. So, in an effort to address the needs of our students, any learning loss as the result of the pandemic, and to provide support for teachers, our students, and their families, the FY23 budget includes 6.5 interventionists, elementary reading and math interventionists, 2 district-wide parent liaisons used across the district for outreach, a math director, and math and literacy coaches across all levels to support our teaching staff, social workers, counselors, and a school psychologist make up 4 positions for next year as we continue to meet the social-emotional learning needs of our students. Special education evaluation team leader makes up 1.5 positions. We've added 7 classroom teachers across the district. We've added 2 to support the needs of our English learners with English learner teachers. And last but not least, we've added an additional library media specialist at the elementary school. So this year's FY23 budget has increased by 3.15%, with 2.19% of the operating budget used to meet the needs of our students moving forward, for a total increase of 5.34%, with a total FY23 operating budget of $57,217,200. And does that conclude it?
We're done.
Yes, Mr. O'Connell will now speak.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hello, my name is Donovan O'Connell. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee.
Nice job.
I would like to start my presentation by explaining who the Finance Committee is and what our typical budget process looks like. So the first, the Finance Committee is a 9-member board appointed by our esteemed town manager. We learn about, explain, and make recommendations on all aspects of the municipal finance on behalf of the town's residents. Typically, the budget process for us begins with a revenue and fixed cost committee, which includes 2 finance committee members, and they make revenue recommendations to the town manager. After those recommendations are made, the town manager and school department work collaboratively within their departments to create their proposed budgets, and they present them to their respective elected boards as well as the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee then meets with the various stakeholders until they are confident enough to provide a recommendation on the budget tonight at town meeting. This year, the budget is $125 million approximately, with a breakdown of the revenues and expenses shown on the screen, I hope. Oh, that's my fault probably. There you go. The Finance Committee remains confident that the town administration continues to keep North Andover on strong financial footing. Further, the Finance Committee believes the town administration has put together a smart and well-structured budget for fiscal year 23 that covers both short-term needs and long-term goals. The solid fiscal position the town is in has enabled the town administration to put forth Facilities Master Plan 2. While we budgeted for reduced services last year, the Finance Committee was happy to see an overall increase in spending of about 7.5%. While we didn't return completely to our pre-pandemic levels of fees and meal tax revenues, we have seen an unprecedented amount of free cash this year. In a typical year, I think as the town manager alluded to, we forecast approximately $650,000 to $750,000 of new growth, which is the normal driver for free cash. And over the last 5 years, we've averaged actual new growth of approximately $969,000 per year. For fiscal year 23, the new growth is upwards of approximately $6 million. A little more than half that comes from Amazon, and that is an extraordinary amount. All of this new growth contributes to give North Andover a free cash balance of approximately $7.6 million, and this is money that the administration proposes to help fund the Jumpstart Facilities Master Plan 2. The Finance Committee believes the budget was prepared appropriately for our current projected revenues and voted to recommend favorable action regarding the fiscal year 23 operating budget, capital improvement plan, and enterprise plan fund budgets. The committee would like to recognize that North Andover's current financial position and how we got here over the last several years. Our town administrators and boards have worked hard to maintain sound fiscal stewardship and of our community, which has allowed us to maintain our AAA bond rating, help build up free cash and reserves, which helped us get us through the pandemic and will keep us on strong financial footing. Lastly, looking forward, the Finance Committee would be remiss not to mention that the needs of North Andover Public Schools are substantial. Recurring revenue sources fall short of meeting the projected need of the school buildings in particular. Facilities Master Plan 2 is a comprehensive roadmap to address the needs of our schools, not to mention also the fire department and the youth center. While this plan spans longer than we would have hoped for, it does so in a fiscally sound way that will impact the average taxpayer in the most expedient way possible. There are projects that could potentially happen within the town over the next few years that may be able to reduce the time of Facilities Master Plan 2 takes or might change that path forward. The Finance Committee looks forward to continued discussions regarding those plans. Thank you.
So we've had all the recommendations and thoughts of diligent committees. Do we have any questions about our plus $110 million budget? How often do we get to spend $110 million plus? Anybody? Any queries whatsoever? Sir, are you walking down to the microphone? Thank you for that clarity. And I think we are ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please raise your card with your banded hand. You may put them down. All those opposed, please raise your card. We see only isolated opposition. We declare the budget passed. Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to most especially thank the members serving in the little-known but most consequential role of the Finance Committee. And I thank you for being the conscience and good diligence of this board. I want to say special thanks to several members who are no longer on the stage but are sitting in the audience, and they are former Chair Sasha Weinrich, Thomas Ringler, and Kevin Foley. Thank you for your service to our community. Very selfless. And lastly, we welcome some new faces sitting at the table, and they are Ava Pastor, Nancy Sarro, and Brianna Stetson. I hope you enjoyed your inaugural year on the FinCom. As the chair just said, they had to put up with Donovan O'Connell, so they did just fine. Thank you.
They survived.
Before we go to the next article, I have something somewhat surprising. I'm holding in my hand 2 junior operator driver's licenses that the fire department found on the floor somewhere. They're either 2 really good fakes, which I wish I had 50 years ago, or somebody has actually lost them. So I'd invite you to come up to the desk on the left to claim them. If you know who you are, go check yourself. 2 junior operator licenses. We will now go to Article 21. Is there a motion on Article 21?
Yes, I move to move Article 21. That's okay, my fault.
I didn't give you enough time, I'm sorry. I could have jammed a few more minutes.
Nope.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. This is a somewhat unusual article that puts a cap on judgments made by prior town meetings. Do we have a short presentation?
Mr. Moderator, the Stevens Estate is now being funded through a revolving account, which we authorized last year and again this year in the consent calendar, so the enterprise fund is no longer necessary.
Okay, are we clear with that explanation? Any questions about it? Please, committee, recommendation?
The Finance Committee favorably recommends action.
And the Select Board?
The Select Board also recommends favorable action.
Okay, anything else from the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please raise your red card. Thank you very much. All those opposed, please raise your red card. We see an overwhelming vote in favor in both rooms. Thank you very, very much. We will now move to Article 22. Is there a motion?
Yes,
Mr. O'Connell.
Mr. Moderator, I move to adopt Article 22 as printed in the warrant.
And is there a second?
Second.
The motion is made and seconded. Is there a brief comment by any party?
Mr. Moderator.
Please.
We had some existing capital accounts for the Stevens Estate. There is funds left in those accounts. At last check, approximately $140,000. We will be transferring those accounts over to the revolving account so that we can continue to use them for the Stevens Estate.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the floors? Hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your card. You may put them down. All those opposed, raise your card. Seeing none, it is adopted. We will now move to Article 25. And while we're doing that, I'm sorry? Yeah, we're going to embarrass the young man. That's all right. You're welcome. You're very welcome to the stage.
Mr. Moderator, I move we return the junior operator license to the young man.
We may not have a unanimous vote on that. His parents might vote no anyway. Thank you very, very much. Small town stuff. We love it. Article 25. Is there a motion on Article 25?
Mr. Moderator, I
Thank you.
move to adopt Article 25 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen.
The motion is made. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, and we're going to have a 5-minute presentation by the town manager and the superintendent of schools.
Terrific. Article 25, the Massachusetts School Building Authority has approved the Kittredge School into their initial eligibility period. And this vote is to see if the town will vote to appropriate or borrow or transfer from funds available $900,000 to be expended under the direction of the to-be-formed Kittredge School Building Committee for a feasibility study. As part of being accepted into the Massachusetts School Building Authority, commonly known as the MSBA, eligibility period, in this first step, this next step is part of the process to determine the town's financial and community readiness to enter the MSBA capital process. If accepted into that process, the town would be eligible for approximately 50% reimbursement of eligible capital expenses related to the building of a new Kittredge school.
I'm just here to show my support for this article and to support the superintendent and the school committee in this endeavor.
That's it?
That's it.
I love this. I think you both are hired. Do we have any discussion about this article? Generational interest. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Ron Carpenito, 34 West Woodbridge. Just curious, is it likely we're going to be accepted? We're being asked to spend $900,000 for a feasibility study. Is it likely we're going to get into this program for this benefit?
Yeah, so we have been accepted into this initial eligibility period, which is really important. Many of you may know we've applied for the middle school for the past several years and not got in. It often takes districts several tries to get into the queue or into this period. So we've been officially accepted into eligibility period. There'll be some benchmarks to meet along the way, but being accepted is pretty remarkable, particularly in a first-year application. So yes.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of Article 25, please raise your card. You may put them down. All those opposed, please raise your card. See a smattering of noes. The motion passes overwhelmingly with a supermajority vote provided. I'd like... Go ahead. The school committee is clapping anyway. Let's all join in. So on another happy note, it's important for me to suggest that after decades of service, that John Weir has been elevated to the position of fire chief. And I want to thank him and his extraordinary crew. Get up. Get up. I am the chief embarrasser of North Andover, so thank you, John. I really want to thank you and your crew, the gentlemen here and ladies throughout the venues, for helping make sure that this was a safe environment. It's greatly appreciated. You hold my feet to the proverbial fire, and I'm delighted by that. Thank you very, very much. So we are going to Article 26. Is there a motion?
I move that we adopt Article 26 as printed in the warrant and shown on the screen.
The motion is made.
Second.
And seconded. And could we have an explainer about what we're doing?
Absolutely, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you.
Amazingly, we took more debt than we needed on some articles, and we didn't spend it all. So we'd like to give it back.
That's a privilege. Are we clear on what's being requested? I see a lot of nods. All those in favor of the motion as presented, raise your card. Those opposed? Seeing none, I'll declare it a unanimous vote. Why wouldn't we? Before we get to Article 27, I'd like to just note that I'm particularly grateful to the citizen advocates who are supporting us today. John Fooey, who's dealing with some technology problems in the other room as the deputy moderator. Thank you very much, John. And if you need assistance from any of those people, you can come right up to the front of the room, the tellers at all. Also, the citizen advocates who are running the remote question play, and they are Heather McNeil, Carolyn Cole, and Housing Authority member Max Broderbrodt. Thank you very, very much. Let's give them a hand, please. They are deserving of their volunteerism. I'm also displeased to share with you that we have a need to say thank you to the town's first ever full-time town council, an action created by this meeting a half a dozen years or so ago. And Suzanne Egan, as our town council, has been a great source of advice and assistance to me and to this community. This will be her final town meeting in North Andover as she leaves for a new post in the city of Gloucester later this month. I'd like to ask you to join me in appreciation to Suzanne. Please. So, Article 27. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, I'd move to adopt Article 27 as printed in the warrants.
The motion is made by the chair of the planning board. Is there a second to the motion? The motion is seconded. So I suspect that there's a need for a bit of explanation, and I'd invite Mr. Goldberg to come to the microphone, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Eitan Goldberg, Chair of the Planning Board. So Article 27 asks to adopt an inclusionary zoning bylaw. So just to be clear, Article 27 is not related to Articles 28 and 29. It is a separate and independent article. After last year's town meeting, where we heard a lot of people talk about the need for affordable housing, the planning department of our town, who is excellent, and the planning board went to work trying to create a bylaw that would help us create more affordable housing in town. So that is the purpose and what this inclusionary housing requirement does. What the bylaw does, it states that if someone is to build 8 or more new units as in any one development, and that could be condos or apartments or townhomes, anything that's 8 or more is required as part of that development to set aside 15% or more as affordable housing. Affordable housing, we use the state definition regarding area median income. So that 15% is based on how many new units are created. So whether it's 8 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 100, that 15% applies. We also put in a provision that if they are ownership units, that you could also seek to do a payment in lieu, which means instead of building the units, you could make a contribution to our affordable housing trust that could be used for any number of programs, such as first-time home buyers programs or funding affordable housing units themselves, to the Housing Authority, a number of different things. This bylaw is in line with many bylaws throughout the Commonwealth, especially kind of in this North Shore eastern area. We looked at many other bylaws, took some from portions from others. We went over this with DHCD, which is the state regulators when it comes to affordable housing, and they were very much for it. The Affordable Housing Trust was for it. I'll tell you that the Planning Board was unanimous in support, and the Select Board was in support. It's not a tool that necessarily will get us significant increases, but what it does is if we ever reach our 10% threshold that we want to get to under and required to get to under Master Law 40B, it helps us stay there. So if we get to that, it keeps us there. It's a tool to keep us at our affordable housing threshold and to provide more affordable housing in town, which is something that we heard loud and clear that a lot of people were in favor of. So I would ask that you support the article, and if anyone has any questions, come on up.
So do we have any queries? Please come to the meeting, to the front of the meeting, excuse me.
I'm Leanne Patnod from 106.
Bring it much closer to you, and please state your name and address once again.
Leanne Patnod, 100 Salem Street. The only question I had was when you mentioned that if there was a project that that it wasn't going to be feasible for the developer to do the 15% and they could make a donation. When I reviewed that piece, there doesn't seem to be any like qualified percentage or designated amount. Is that something that will be figured out later on? It just almost seems, and mind you, my husband's a developer, so the reason I'm saying it is it seems a bit vague. I mean, can somebody say, oh, I'll give you $2,000, and you know that's not sufficient of a donation?
Oh, I'm trying to find the formula. Hold on a sec.
I just didn't see it mentioned in that piece that talked about in lieu of.
Give us a second while we scroll through. In the meantime, I'm remiss in noting that one person who was here in an official capacity last year has now retired from the title of fire chief to just plain citizen and grandfather, and that's Bill McCarthy, and we welcome and thank him for his years of service. Did I vamp enough for you?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you very much.
If you, on page 57, this is 195, 8.102, Section B, Section little b, calculation of fee in lieu of units. The fee in lieu of the construction or provision of affordable housing units will be equal to the difference between the full and fair market value of a comparable market rate housing unit and the affordable price of the applicable affordable housing unit. So it's not going to be a set number. It will vary based on the when it's happening, what the market rates are. But there is also a provision that in order to even be allowed to do that, you have to get a special permit from the planning board and prove why you can't just build the unit.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? Please, sir.
Hi, Stan Novak, 26 Pembroke Road.
Welcome.
I have heard a lot tonight about affordable housing. I have not heard anything about preserving or increasing property values for current homeowners. I am a little worried that all this affordable housing we are building is actually reducing the value of the homes that are already owned by the people who already live in town. And by building this affordable housing, we're essentially stealing money from widows, retired firefighters and police officers, and veterans, people who have invested a lot of money in the community, but are going to have a hard time later in life when they need the funds from their homes that would ordinarily have appreciated more, except for the fact that we have all this additional so-called affordable housing.
Thank you. I don't know if there was a question in there. Is there a response? You're not required, sir.
Don't think there was a question.
Okay. We have another query or comment?
Evening. John Willis. I'm a former attorney here in town, and I used to represent a lot of developers and everything. And in reading this article...
Come a little closer, John.
In reading this article, I understand that the community is always interested in trying to meet the percentage that we're required to have for low to moderate housing. But it would seem to me that this article would load that burden on people who own land, because the person that's going to buy their land is going to have to factor that into what he's willing to pay for the land. Now, a lot of people own property and have had it as open space for a long period of time, expecting that at some point in time someone would want to buy it from them. And it almost seems as though this burden is not being shifted to the developer, it's being shifted to the landowners. And personally, I think that's an improper way to do it.
So I would just point out that...
excuse me. You're very welcome, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would point out that it only applies when you're developing 8 or more units. So most, almost all single-family homes in town are not going to have the space to create 8 or more units. It's going to be only where you have larger tracts of land that you can either subdivide or put a larger complex on. So for the majority of people, this would not affect at all their ability to sell their home or anything like that, because it doesn't apply to them. It's only really when you're going to have larger developments, again, 8 units or more. And again, we did also talk with developers who have done projects in town to seek their opinion and get feedback on that, and it was primarily positive with some changes to language that were suggested. There are also some provisions in here that give carrots to those who do this and provide more affordable housing than they're required by allowing density bonuses and things like that, so that the property values can actually increase.
Thank you. Sir.
My name is Andrew Rayner, and I live at 11A Concord Street in North Andover.
Welcome.
And now I know other people who have significantly different problems than I do. and who receive affordable housing in this town. And, it's not my fault. The reason why I have to take the measures in order to afford my housing in this town. I did the best I could to get a degree, to work for it and everything, and I worked very hard. And, in order, someone says, well, later in life, we're always talking about taking care of the people and being on the side of the Ukraine and everything, which I personally believe, and I could give you facts, that it's actually detrimental to the United States. So, and we've completely forgotten about Afghanistan. I never hear about the women who are at this moment, who are, if they're not already assassinated. So I don't have to explain that further, but, helping other people in need is actually very, we can't do it. And North Andover is a nice town. And let me reiterate what one of the people who got up last year and said that he lived in this town and now he returned and he was having trouble as well. It was a different person than myself. So I'm just advocating for the plan and for affordable housing and just asking, with the love of God, to please help the people who have had trouble and, at a little bit of an expense, a little bit less money, in retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. We have another query or comment?
George Kaler, 41 Quail Run Road. I'd like to respond partially to some comments that have already been made. They've raised some general issues, some large issues, and I can't resolve them, or I don't have an answer to them. But I would like to throw out a couple of thoughts that counter to that. First of all, I take it as an article of faith that a healthy community has jobs that cover a broad range of incomes. We don't have jobs just for the rich. We have jobs for a broad range. Another article of faith is that we have housing for a broad range of income. We don't have we have housing for a broad range of incomes. Then a fact, in North Andover, approximately 25% of the households are earning no more than 80% of the area median income. 80% of AMI is the threshold that's set by Chapter 40B for affordable housing. Roughly 25% of the households would qualify. And then I would also add these comments. We're not born equal in opportunity, intelligence, determination, imagination, and so on. We all have those to varying degrees. Also, life is not fair. Accidents, illnesses, incidents, and so on affect us all differently. Right now, the economic climate is such that a builder cannot build a house that's affordable to somebody making 80% of AMI and make a profit. He needs a subsidy. Where does that subsidy come from? Well, government certainly is one source, but this inclusionary zoning bylaw will provide another source, which is people that are buying houses in that development. To some extent, they will be subsidizing those houses for the people that are earning less than 80%, and I think that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Brian Roach, 200 Coachman's Lane. You heard the comment about housing values and home values. That's fantastic for those of us who have been fortunate enough to be able to purchase a home in this town. But what about the thousands of households here in this town and throughout the Commonwealth who have not had that good fortune? We need to create more affordable housing. Estimates are by 2040, they'll require 400,000 new housing units to be built throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and Greater Boston. If we don't do our part, if every community in Greater Boston doesn't do its part, we're going to choke out our economy by being unable to house our workers. I commend the Planning Board for moving forward with this.
Good evening. Brian Donahue, 33 Morningside Lane.
Welcome, Mr. Donahue. Delight to see you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just going to give you a 1-minute historical perspective. 75 years ago, the Augustinian friars purchased a chicken farm at Wilson's Corner on Route 114. The college was built for returning veterans. Fundraisers were held in the Lawrence Stadium. A student appeared at Father McQuaid's door asking, "Where is the college?" By 1967, when I graduated from Merrimack, the enrollment had increased to 2,000 students. As of that time, there was no library, hockey rink, or basketball court, but the college was moving ahead, installing values and a moral compass for 30,000 future students. In the 1970s, the Flatley Company built a first-class apartment complex at Wilson's Corner. Approximately 50 years later, we face the challenge to tear down Royal Crest and build a new mega-complex apartment units with hotels, shops, and college dorms.
Sir, you'll forgive me, but your commentary is misplaced. We're not talking about that article at this moment in time. We're on Article 27.
Okay. So
now, if you want, you've got 12 seconds if you want to finish it up and ask these people's indulgence to park or remember the conversation. You're welcome to do that. Please.
Should I come back, Mark?
You can finish up in the next 20 seconds.
No, I can't finish in 20 seconds.
Okay. Thank you very much. You'll have to get in queue once again, and you can pick up from that point, okay?
Okay.
Thank you very, very much. Do we have any other comment about Article 27? Hearing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented, Article 27, please raise your red card. Thank you very much. All those opposed to Article 27, raise your red card.
Mark, I've got numbers coming from the other room.
Yep.
Can you wait for them?
Yeah, please. As this requires a two-thirds vote, it's quite obvious that there's an overwhelming vote in this room. We want to make sure that that's the case in the other room. Yep.
In favor.
So we have affirmation from the other room as well. The motion passes by a two-thirds vote. I so declare. Thank you very much. Article 28 and 29, the main show. Maybe with some courtesy to each other, we'll all get home to watch the second half of the Celtics game. I think that's a popular notion. I'm going to explain what's going to happen first before we hear any motions. Article 28 and 29 will be discussed together. There will be a series of speakers by arrangement with both the proponents and the opponents and sanctioned town boards. I need to let you know that over these weeks and months I've enjoyed dozens of conversations. Well, I've mostly enjoyed dozens of conversations and email communications with all of the principals on all sides of this matter. We will be considering a motion to be made by the planning board. Let me share some inside baseball. In Moderator School 101, you learn that you never allow a negative motion to be made. It's just too confusing. So by agreement with the chair of the planning board, the planning board developed the initial article, and its senior member of the planning board, and they happen to be on opposite sides of the matter, we have all agreed that a positive motion should be put before this meeting for the benefit of informing the committee and having a more rational judgment in terms of a yes or a no vote, so we all know what a yes and a no vote means. So when a motion is put before us, both Mr. Goldberg and Mr. Simons will have up to 7 minutes to share facts on the article, to fully inform the judgment of this meeting that we are being asked to make. It shows something that I think is somewhat magical, that this group of volunteer professionals have spent some 18 or 20 months reviewing this, can come to a different judgment, but can do so in a collaborative fashion. And they will be presenting those basic truths to the meeting. I ask you to pay very close attention. I will not allow comments from the floor that are in contention to the facts that are being presented by Mr. Goldberg and Mr. Simons. At the conclusion of that joint presentation of the Planning Board, Mr. Goldberg, the chair, will make a 5-minute argument in favor of the motion. Immediately thereafter, Planning Board member Peter Boynton will make a 5-minute argument opposing the motion. Upon conclusion of that, I will ask the Select Board and the Finance Committee for their recommendations and presentations by each. Thereafter, presentations by the Select Board and who are in favor of the motion, and a majority unanimity of the Finance Committee. We will have a presentation from the town manager who will share further information to the community. Lastly, 2 officially sanctioned town boards who have conducted diligence on the matter have very, very brief statements that they will make from the floor. And thereafter, we will go to queries first, questions rather than comments first from the floor. I do want to let you know that all petitioners of this motion that you are about to hear from the Planning Board, both pro and con, agree that they wish that there be no amendments to the article, and they wish, and we wish, to give it a clean up or down vote. So with that as a predicate, I would like to hear a motion from the Planning Board. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, thank you. I'd move to adopt Article
28. We're going to, you'll forgive me, we're going to hear argument of both together, but they will be voted on separately.
Article 28 as printed in the warrant.
The motion is made. Is there a second to the motion?
Seconded.
The motion is made and seconded. It is, as you see in the warrant, a very long article which warrants the kind of discussion that these 2 selfless gentlemen on opposite sides are going to be making to this argument, to this meeting, in order to inform the meeting. I invite Eitan and John to come to the microphone, please, the podium. And if, once they arrive, yeah. If you would put 7 minutes on the clock, I would appreciate that a great deal. Please.
All right, thank you. So Articles 28 and 29, we could go to. So what are we doing here today? Articles 28. Article 28 is to amend the zoning bylaw by adding Article 19, a mixed-use overlay district. So here you are asking to be vote to authorize zoning at the Royal Crest property, which would allow Royal Crest to be redeveloped pending Planning Board development, project plan review, and plan approval. This requires a simple majority vote of town meeting, and that's based on a change to state law which occurred in 2020. You're then asked if you approve Article 28 to approve Article 29, which is simply a zoning map which incorporates what would have been allowed in Article 28. So 28 is really the meat, 29 is accoutrement to 28 in showing what it would look like if 28 is approved.
This is a picture of Royal Crest today. You can read all the numbers: 588 units, about 1,600 residents, 213 kids are the key parameters. This is in the R5 zoning district today, which allows heights of 40 feet and buildings of 18 units in a single structure.
This is the proposed site plan for Article 28, and we'll get into it later, but one of the main things about Article 28 is the exact buildings, where they're located, what kind of uses are allowed, the number of units is all specifically called out in the zoning. That's unusual for zoning. Usually zoning says, okay, you can have this type of setbacks, this type of floor area ratio, this type of heights, but doesn't really call out the specific project. This one we're asking you to actually approve the or disprove the actual project. So what the project consists of is a mixed-use development. It has multi-family apartments. It has which are a mix between market rate and 40B, which are the state affordable units. It has student housing, so taking some of the Merrimack students, or most of, that currently live on the property, and instead of being interspersed throughout the property, to put them into a dorm, which you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. There are a number of townhomes, which you see in the top left. There's also some age-restricted 55 plus. There's office and retail space. There's room for a small grocer. There's dedicated open space, as well as a hotel and town green. So those are all the things, kind of the elements of this mixed-use project.
You look at this slide, on the left-hand side, it shows the number of housing units in the new project. So compared to the 588 today, there's 1,254 by those various categories. And then in addition to that, on the right-hand side, there's the square footage of the different additional uses in the property, including the retail, the hotel, the parking, and the office.
This is a brief slide just about the differences in the current versus proposed Royal Crest. As John said, current 588 units. We have the proposed up there, which is that 1,200 number that he just talked about. Obviously, the acres, the size stays the same. You have the population change that is being projected, the bedroom, again, projected bedroom count, projected amount of student housing. That's for how many live there today in terms of Merrimack students. We have how many age-restricted units. Currently, there are none. There would be the 35 in the proposed plan. Differences with open space, buffers, wetland resources, and things like that. So this highlights the proposed changes to what's there and what could be there if the proposal is accepted.
This slide just shows the difference in square footage of built space compared to what's there today. So you see the 800,000 square footage today is the total, and in the future, when including all the residential buildings, all the commercial buildings, and all the parking, it's closer to 2.7 million. And you can see on the far right, that's 3.3 times as much built space on the property as exists today.
This is a slide with the proposed building heights. As I stated earlier, all of the building heights are specifically listed. So in most zoning, usually you can have up to X feet. Here we have it broken down by each specific building, how many stories, how tall it could possibly be. You see the tallest would be the hotel, which is set back towards the middle of the property. Then you have some of the market rate housing. Now it's not full living up to those top stories. Some of that is for the architecture, but we do have 4 stories and 3-story buildings, and those are the those would be exactly the heights of what they would be allowed to build if this proposal moves forward.
This slide shows what the floor area ratio of the project is both today and in the future. Floor area ratio is really the number of square footage of buildings times divided by the number of square feet in the total property, and it's shorthand really to show the increase in the change in density. And you see the number is 3.3, which is exactly the change in the square footage. So this is 3.3 times as dense as the existing project.
So a quick slide. One of the things that is part of the proposal is a guaranteed amount of open space. You'll see that there's a 1.5 mile walking, biking path surrounding, it kind of circulates around the site. There is a large amount of buffering, keeping, one of the things at the planning board that really all the members were concerned and found important was the buffering, and that as many trees as possible be kept, and through the iterations of the plan that has certainly increased, with most of the trees outside of on 114 being kept. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Let's turn off the timer. I'm going to give these gentlemen more time because of their good work. Thank you.
We'll move quickly.
This slide shows the elements of parking on the property. There's 3 components. One is surface parking, one is on-street parking, and the third and the most significant is the new parking structures. And you can see what the parking requirements are for the different types. I shouldn't say requirements, the actual provided parking spaces, but in total it's nearly 2,700 spaces.
So quickly, what process has gone on so far? So since September of 2020, we've been having meetings as well as a zoning working group to go through a potential bylaw that was ultimately crafted and you have here today. It regulates the density, the setbacks, the landscaping, the street layout, really anything you can think of is regulated, that would be on site, is regulated in the zoning bylaw. All the uses and structures must be consistent with the plan that's adopted at town meeting. All uses and structures are then subject to plan review. So having to come back if this is approved and we have a plan, then each time an element of that plan is going to be constructed, the developer would have to come back to the planning board for review to make sure that what they're doing is consistent with the plan approved by this town meeting.
So as the moderator said, the planning board has been looking at this project for a long time. These are the different areas that we've looked at. I think you can read them all off. I would just point out that extensive traffic studies were done, stormwater management plans, financial impact, and phasing and construction management. But the list shows all the different areas that the planning board did look at related to this project.
Dimension, so like I said earlier, dimensional and density requirements are part of this, so maximum building coverage, how much open space, the floor area, again, number of units, the building heights, that's all part of what this plan is. So really, if the plan's approved, then there's not much, if any, deviation from the plan. So we put as much as we could, and again, those were from people that wound up being for the project, wound up being against the project, all asking really tough questions about these kind of things so that we could have a bylaw that if the town wants to go forward, we have everything we want in there. If we don't, then we've done our job in terms of providing the information. Oh. All right, good. Almost done. Okay. Yep.
So if town meeting does approve this zoning in the master development plan, individual components of the project would go to the planning board for a process that's similar to what site plan review is today. That basically, if the component of the project is consistent with the master plan and follows planning board rules and regulations and follows conservation laws and other regulatory processes, the planning board would approve it with conditions, and then a building permit would eventually be issued.
And as I think we discussed, changes, if there were changes, anything that is substantial, a use, a size of a building, any significant change in units, that has to come back to town meeting for approval. If there was something minor, really minor, then that could be changed. If it was something that was not substantial, but it's also not, really, really minor, it would have to come back to the planning board to hold a public hearing. So, it's going to be in your hands to determine really the plan as it's set out. So I think that's the end of our presentation. Again, this was a lot of work by members of this volunteer board, so they did a lot of work on this. So you'll hear next about why you may want to approve it, why you may not, but we all agree about this is what the bylaw would do if approved.
I thank the gentleman for laying out the conclusions and facts so clearly. We're now going to move toward the advocacy part of this motion. We've just experienced something very, very different, which I may choose to adopt more often. First, we will hear a 5-minute argument from Mr. Goldberg in support of the motion. Please begin, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So, as many of you can read in the warrant and in the planning board recommendation, the planning board actually recommended unfavorable action. It was a 3-2 vote. I was in the minority of that vote. I recommended favorable action. We do have a 6th non-voting member who also would have voted favorably, so I'm speaking on behalf of the 3 members of the planning board who were in favor of this project. And again, you heard the facts, and I think what's kind of great about this meeting is we can take those facts and come to different conclusions. So I'm going to say why I think you may want to vote yes on this project. One of the reasons, so here we have the site plan. So one of the things you see in the site plan is the 40B affordable housing, which we talked a little bit about earlier. So for those of you who don't know, or just as clarity, 40B is a state law that requires cities and towns to have 10% of their housing stock be affordable. If they are not, then those towns are subject to developers building projects that don't have to necessarily comply with zoning. There's some limited things that a town can do, but you don't have much of a say. And so one of the things that this project does is we're currently at about 8.5%. After the 2020 census, that number will be in the 7s. This project, if approved, would get us to our 10%. And then with the inclusionary zoning bylaw that we just passed, we'd have a real good chance of staying there. So that allows the town significant control over future projects. Not only that, it actually provides affordable housing. It provides 100 units that would be restricted as affordable housing units. So something goes on the deed, says these have to be affordable for all time. Currently at Royal Crest there are 0. It is all market rate apartments. The other thing that this project does with multifamily housing, not the 40B, just the number of units, is it creates a significant amount of additional stock of apartment-type units and units in our town and in our area. That is sorely needed. You'll hear from the Housing Trust, and as a gentleman talked about earlier, we are in a significant supply crunch. That is why prices are so high. The fact that some of these units, the townhomes, the apartments, are market rate and will certainly be expensive because this is an expensive and desirable area to live in. But when you have more supply, economics say that can at least blunt or even reduce some of the cost because there's less demand. It's a mixed-use project. This is the most sustainable type of growth or development that we can kind of have in these days. It has businesses that support the people that live there, so retail stores, convenience stores. There's in the bylaw, there's a provision for a small grocer, like a Trader Joe's kind of place. So that's actually on the map. You can look at where the grocer would be. These support people who are living there and can go and shop and don't have to necessarily go out. Also people who want to come from anywhere in town to go and walk the open spaces and go to the retail. Mixed use is our best way to establish high property tax value and to make sustainable growth. It also helps the rest of our town when we have people living close to a downtown, close to the college, close to other places, 114, where they can shop and spend. The 55 plus in townhomes, this adds additional housing choice for people who are downsizing or looking for these types of housing. The student housing, right now Royal Crest houses about between 600 and 800 students. Those are all interspersed throughout the property and would actually be in one dorm, probably a better controlled situation than what is there today. And we heard a lot of complaints about the interactions between students and residents today, and other residents today. Students are residents. Preserves green spaces and also allows for a hotel. I know this is something we don't have. We don't have a hotel in town. I think that's a much needed thing. Frankly, when my relatives want to come to visit, it would be great to have a hotel. It would be very good for my marriage, so I appreciate that. All right, so what does it look like? We've heard a lot of numbers. Let's look at what it looks like. It's a district concept with different districts throughout, which have different types of architecture throughout. This is the rendering of the town center. We have the clock tower, which would be a kind of a centerpiece, and the retail on the bottom floor of multifamily. We have the town center hotel, kind of described as similar to the Hotel Viking, if any of you have been to Newport at the top of the hill. That kind of architecture set back along the green, which is a big open space, sort of like a common. We have the Mill District.
You'll forgive me, does the gentleman need another minute?
If I could have a minute and a half, that would be great.
I'll give you the minute and a half, and I will also add it to Mr. Boynton's time as well.
Fantastic.
Go right ahead.
This is the Mill District, where we'd have the multifamily designed to match other Mill District buildings in town, like East and West Mill, as well as the Campus District. This would be what the student housing would look like. Here we have a rendering of the townhomes as well, connected townhomes with little streets in between. I think this isn't the kind of the mega development I think that's kind of been portrayed as. It is big, it is more dense, it is a change, it is different, but it is, I think, an amenity to our community. These are the project overviews, and I would just say that I think these positives, the financials, which you'll hear about from the Board of Selectmen, the Select Board, $2.5 to $4.5 million of extra property taxes per year, which can go to money for schools, for roads, for paying wages to town employees. Development agreements, which put $6 to $10 million in the one-time payments in the town's coffers. Local control. If this isn't approved, then something else will happen eventually, something we may not have as much control over. The location is on a major highway in an already residential area near other businesses. So rather than have 5 smaller developments throughout the town, seems from a planning perspective best to do one development with control in one place over a lengthy period of time. So if you want affordable housing, if you want increased services without increased taxes, if you want places for seniors to live, if you like going outside, if you like local control, if you like Trader Joe's and me not getting divorced, then this project is for you. And now to Mr. DeBoynton, who wants me to get divorced.
If you would please put 7 minutes on the clock for Mr. Boynton. 7. Great. Please.
Thanks, and I'm not going to use PowerPoint, so you can take that down if that's all right. Peter Boynton, 320 Stevens Street. I'm a member of the Planning Board, one of the members who voted majority in opposition of this proposal and recommend a no vote. We have been meeting on this on the planning board for a year and a half, every other week, and really taken a very comprehensive look at this proposal. I'm going to attempt to summarize that year and a half of every other Tuesday in 4 points, trying to show the highlights of the concerns that the majority of the planning board had that resulted in our recommending no. Point 1, built square feet. This proposal would result in over a threefold increase in the built square foot of structures on the same size property, going from 800,000 square feet to 2.67 million, more than tripling. Over that year and a half, we had a lot of discussions with the developer and made quite a few suggestions about how this proposal might better fit the property. As a result of that, there were some changes, but they were small. I'll give you an example of one change. The developer agreed that there should not be any 5-story buildings and instead reduce all of them to 4 stories. The tallest 4-story building in our town is about 55 feet. When they reduced this from 5 to 4 stories, the buildings remained at 69 and 70 feet. That's not an effective change. Point 2, the impact of daily vehicle trips. This proposal would result in over a threefold increase in the number of daily vehicle trips at the Royal Crest site. Today, it's 4,500 vehicle trips. If this is approved tonight, that will increase to just under 14,000 daily vehicle trips at the spot in town that we all know is a critical and congested intersection, 114 by the Andover bypass. Now, we also know that Mass DOT has a very substantial improvement project for Route 114, and it includes that area in front of Royal Crest. It goes from about Waverly out to about Stop and Shop. We had Mass DOT come to the planning board, and we asked Mass DOT, what have you done in your planning for Route 114 to take into account this size development? And Mass DOT told the planning board nothing. And we said, what? And Mass DOT told us that they will never expend state taxpayer dollars on a proposal that has not been approved. What that means is that all of the substantial planning being done for Route 114 does not include this proposal. There will be new streetlights on that section of 114. The Andover bypass intersection will be reconfigured. But if you look at that Mass DOT proposal, it does seem odd that they are widening 114, but not in front of Royal Crest, not where there will be a threefold increase in the number of daily vehicle trips, and that's because that project does not take this proposal into account. We've heard a lot about public transit opportunities with the Royal Crest proposal. After a year and a half, I still don't understand. How does an over threefold increase in daily vehicles lead us to more public transit? Point 3, water usage. The town had an engineering firm by the name of Weston and Sampson do a water demand evaluation, and I do want to thank the town manager. The town was very responsive when the planning board asked for this assessment, and we got it. First, I'd like to give you a comparison of the scale of this project using the metric of water consumption. You've all seen the Minko development by China Blossom, and you can see that it's big. This engineering firm has projected that that will add 2.7 million gallons of water per year. That development is only one of 6 that this town has approved over the last 10 years. By comparison, the same engineering firm projects that the Royal Crest proposal, if approved tonight, will result in an increase of water usage 10 times that much, 26 million gallons per year. I want to read a couple of very short quotes out of this 13-page report, and I'll caution you, it's much better to read the 13-page report, but I thought these quotes were worth mentioning. First, the engineering firm noted that between 2019 and 2020, there was a 25% increase in residential water use. That is way beyond the normal annual increases. They're not sure why. They think that the pandemic may have been one of the impacts. Quote, if the town continues to see increases in demand, there could be a greater impact on the lake than forecasted, end quote. Quote, the town should continue to evaluate and consider remedies to reduce current and future demand on the lake, and review impacts of increased development in times of drought to determine how drought will affect the ability to meet demands. There are 16 recommendations in this 13-page report. 15 of the 16 recommendations are focused on how can the town better reduce demand.
The gentleman's time has expired. Can you wrap up in 30 seconds or so, Peter? Thank you.
Final quote. Evaluate options for reducing residential per capita usage to minimize or avoid the need for future water moratoriums. Point 4, the last point.
I guessed.
This is an increase of 676 units. That is nearly the same as all 5 developments over the last 8 years. It's the largest development in the town history. There are affordable units, 97. The developer told us the townhomes would go for $750,000 each, and at the more recent meetings was unable to give us an estimate because they project the prices will be so much higher. The housing crisis. North Andover has done its part with 6 major developments over the last 10 years. The most frequent feedback we have heard on the planning board during my time is why is the town not assessing the cumulative impacts to housing development after housing development? And the answer with this is to propose the largest single development in town history. Final point.
Quickly, please.
The financial figures are very important, and you're going to hear about them, but they're not the whole story. The planning board took an in-depth look and voted 3-2, recommending you vote no. Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Well, now, thank you. The Select Board has a recommendation and a presentation to make. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Get really close. 7 minutes, please.
The Select Board has given favorable action on this article. This slide coming up will show you a summary of the points that we will be making during our presentation. Next slide, please. We'll be hitting these points. I'll be talking about traffic, and to understand the findings of the traffic study, I'd like to note that they studied 10 intersections and utilized daily traffic counts from 2019 pre-COVID. They did projections into 2027 that took into account the cumulative effects of known projects and the planned improvements by Mass DOT on Route 114, as well as the showed traffic increases and this all showed traffic increases between 2.6 and 6.1%, depending on the day and time. This study also analyzed the level of service as it relates to the ability of a given road to handle the number of vehicles expected to generate by traffic coming into the area. The level of service analyzed showed that the level of service will stay the same or improve at 8 of the 10 intersections studied. One of the 2 that decreased does not actually exist today. I'd also like to note that yes, the 114 corridor does not take into account Royal Crest, but this project will trigger the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, which is also known as MEPA, and this will require another full study of the traffic, and it will work in conjunction with Mass DOT, and a full traffic review will be done during the permitting process, and it typically requires the developer to perform additional traffic mitigation. The town has also commissioned a study to assess the cumulative impact of recent permitted projects along with Royal Crest. This study assessed existing travel times and predicted future travel times, taking into account the future projects and planned roadway improvements. This travel time was done the week after April vacation of this year. So looking forward, you'll see that there's they looked 7 years ahead, and the study showed that the impacts were of 30 seconds between Route 114 and Main Street, that's an increase, as well as between Main Street and Route 125, the high end would be 1 minute and 30 seconds. I'm sorry, between 114 Main Street was the 30 seconds, and then between Great Pond Road and Industrial Road would be the minute 30. I'd also like to note that this project comes at the conjunction of 2 major roadways and within 2 miles of 495, which would also allow for the quick disbursement of traffic.
The fiscal impact report determined that at full build-out, the project proposed would house between 194 and 302 students. Historically, we have fluctuated from 160 to 260 students from this site. The schools have accounted for this growth in their planning for Facilities Master Plan 2. During project review for the Facilities Master Plan 2 process, the town commissioned 2 studies to review school impact and school capacity. Review of the data shows that birth rates have decreased and are slated to continue to decrease over the next 8 years. The town's population is anticipated to grow at a slower rate, and we're estimating 56 students from East Mill Pond, Minco, and Avalon, which is a total of 357 units. Princeton Properties estimated 13 students, and 8 have enrolled. Students will be distributed amongst all grades and come in multiple phases over 8 to 10 years in 2026, 29, 31, and 32. Our population trends and projections have held steady at 35 students per year with a small drop due to COVID. Our enrollment shows a growth of 35 students per year consistently, historically.
So we're going to talk about water. Actually, we're going to talk about affordable housing. Sorry about that. So just as a recap, you heard about affordable housing earlier tonight. Currently, the town, according to the Department of Housing and Community Development, we're at about 8.7% affordable. We all know that to meet our requirement, it's a 10% affordable housing for a 40B. We estimate that based on the 2020 census, the next time we get the numbers from DHCD, we'd be at about 8%. So we've actually lost a little bit of affordable housing. Next, please. Royal Crest's impact on affordable housing would put us over the 10%. It would put us at about 10.5% if we were to approve the project tonight and go with the 40B 97 units at Royal Crest. This would bring us to, again, our 10.5%, and it would bring us into what we call safe harbor, which means that we are no longer subject to 40B projects. Next, please. So what does affordable mean? Affordable means that the housing is affordable to those who make less than the area median income, 80% of the area median income, which you can see up here. The housing, any affordable housing has to be subject to the fair housing requirements, which means that it has the same amenities, same, for instance, appliances, everything that's the same as the market rate units. Next, please. Without the 40B, without this proposal passing tonight, we would still be subject to 40B projects. We would still need to be between 236 and 535 rental units that could come across 2 or 3 different sites in town. So we would still be subject to 40B developments. With this project, we no longer have to deal with 40B developments.
Now we'll talk about water capacity. So the Mass Department of Conservation and Recreation forecasted that North Andover's water needs out to 2034, according to the Water Management Act. And you can see that here. Based on prior pumping levels, plus the anticipated withdrawal models, the analysis evaluated the withdrawal was well below the permitted limit. And by the way, that 27 million gallons Royal Crest would consume is literally less than 2 days consumption during the summer. So let's kind of put that big number in perspective. So this graph illustrates that we are well within that, have that capacity. Now moving to density. So quickly showed here comparable projects within North Andover. And as you can see, Royal Crest is proposed at 17 units, which is actually fairly consistent with some of our other larger projects. And that's, I think, when we talk about scale, you can see it relatively here.
Time has expired. Can we wrap up in literally a minute and 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Last slide. And resident relocation. And I think this is very important. There will be a relocation coordinator. And the plan here is detailed. You can see short-term leases with the students. You can see that there's going to be capacity to shift people among the project with the phases. And in addition, there are relocation programs that Trinity and the Air communities offer. And I would just summarize by saying that there's a lot of, I would implore you to recognize the diligence and effort that has gone into all this work, that this is an opportunity for us to evaluate it, and I hope that you look at this and think about where we'll be in 50 years as we're looking back at Royal Crest 50 years hence now.
Are we done with the presentation?
Yes, sir.
We're done. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So next up is the Finance Committee, Mr. O'Connell. And he will have 5 minutes on the clock.
Oh, I won't need 5 minutes.
And I know you will...
I will, but if you permit me an indulgence, thank you. The Celtics are winning currently about halfway through the first quarter, in case anybody's wondering.
Talk about stealing the show.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So Denvin O'Connell, Chairman of the Finance Committee. So typically the Finance Committee issues recommendations on warrant articles that impact the financial resources of the town. Although Articles 28 and 29 are zoning issues, the financial impacts of these articles are potentially significant. The most basic impact of this property, on the budget currently, is a negative one. The annual revenue is about $1.6 million. The annual cost to the town to support this property currently is between $2 million and $3 million, making the current annual negative impact at approximately $500,000 to $1.5 million. During the course of this project, I think others have alluded to this, the developer created a fiscal impact report. They did this in conjunction with our police, fire, veterans, senior center, library, and schools. The town went one step further and engaged an independent consultant to verify the assumptions in that report, and they did. The estimated projected revenue at full build-out will be approximately $6.7 million, which would create a net positive fiscal impact of between approximately $2.1 million and $4.3 million. This number takes into account not only property taxes, but also meals, vehicle excise, hotel, personal property. The Finance Committee would also like to note that because of the development agreements that have been well agreed upon between the developers, the college, and the town, Facilities Master Plan 2 could be accelerated, or a further decrease on the burden the taxpayers would face with Facilities Master Plan 2. Either option would be advantageous in the Finance Committee's opinion. So taking all this into account, the Finance Committee has voted to recommend a favorable action on Articles 28 and 29. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. The last presentation from the stage will be the town manager, and when she commences, we'll put the clock on 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I have the honor of presenting the town's 2 development agreements. So while the planning board was doing their due diligence, the town was also watching very closely as we were going through all of the different studies, listening to the comments of the planning board as well as the public comments in negotiating 2 development agreements. One with the developer, Trinity and Amco, and a second one with Merrimack College. These development agreements would only go into effect in the event that Articles 28 and 29 pass tonight. There's a guaranteed amount of $9.9 million, as much as $10.9 million in the 2 agreements, with potential for more with the per capita mitigation. I'd quickly take you through the terms. The first one is really traffic mitigation. The developer will be required to establish a traffic monitoring and reporting program. At the issuance of the first building permit, the developer will place $1 million in escrow. 12 months after the certificate of occupancy in each phase, and we expect 6 phases in total, the developer will give us $10,000 to conduct a traffic study to make certain that the traffic burdens were projected and mitigated accordingly. If the volumes of traffic were material in excess of those projected, we can utilize that $1 million for traffic mitigation, and in the event those funds were not used at the completion of the project or 12 years from issuance of the first building permit, they would be divided equally. Some ideas for that post-mitigation traffic enhancement, and it's really hard to kind of think these through because we haven't gone through that MEPA process, but things I have done in the past is scope broadening, so looking at intersections that were not included in the initial traffic study and determining how those might help traffic flow better around the project site, study of and changes to intersection control, new technology. 10 years from now, we're going to certainly have better intelligent traffic signal control than we have today, and so we'll be able to implement that. And also analysis of driveway spacing and sight lines. Sometimes things don't work like you expect them going to, and so we have that funding to look at those items. The developer has also agreed to implement additional traffic mitigation measures, including bicycle parking, as well as implementation of bus routes to Boston and to either the Andover or Lawrence train stations. Additionally, the developer has agreed to pay $1 million for a pedestrian safety fund, which would also be held in escrow in the same way as the traffic fund. This would have 3 separate studies, one after the first phase, one after the second phase, and the third one after the hotel was built. If we studied the pedestrian safety issues and found that we required any enhancements, that $1 million would be used to make those enhancements, which could include all kinds of things like a crossing guard or potential funding of a portion of the pedestrian footbridge. Again, at the end of the project, or 12 years from issuance of the first building permit, any funds that are left would be split. For open space, the developer has agreed to permanently restrict the perimeter, which we all saw as Eitan was presenting. They also have agreed to fund a walking trail study for connections to the common in downtown, as well as $100,000 to build a trail to a pedestrian walkway to the Franklin School. They have also agreed for a few community partnerships. Most of these are within 90 days of the first building permit. $550,000 for water improvements, $50,000 for a sewer capacity analysis and redesign of sewer flow, $850,000 for parks and fields improvements, which will be dictated by the Fields Master Plan that you all voted for during the Capital Improvement Plan, $500,000 for a community policing initiative, $650,000 to fund the fire station design, which we, as a part of the Facilities Master Plan 2, $150,000 for the senior center, $200,000 to fund the Steens Memorial Library bookmobile, which is close to my heart, I'm very excited about, $500,000 for the design of the youth center, which is part of Facilities Master Plan 2, $3.5 million for the Franklin School Gym, increased classroom space and other improvements. That is a two-part. The first half would come within 90 days of the first building permit. The second half would come within 90 days of the second building permit for Phase 2. And $300,000 for the Downtown Properties Improvement Grant Fund. The developer has also agreed to a per capita mitigation payment. What that means is that from the 5th year to the 10th year of total occupancy, when the project is completely done, if there is more people than they claim there is going to be in the fiscal impact report, which is 2016, they will pay per person for every person over that. In the event that any of the parcels, other than the current residence hall, becomes owned by Merrimack College or any other tax-exempt organization, they have agreed to continue to pay taxes for a period of 10 years following the conveyance. 15% of the net new units must stay affordable forever, helping us stay at that 10% that we're our goal of that. There must be enough units to meet our 40B safe harbor when the building permit is pulled. So if we end up needing 98, there will be 98 rather than 97. The developer would also need to pay any school transportation costs caused by relocating students. The second development agreement, 2 slides.
Go right ahead.
The second development agreement is with Merrimack College. It is for $1,650,000 to be placed in an escrow account. College prefers, but does not require us to spend it over 10 years for education, public safety, or town infrastructure. The college also agrees to develop guidelines with the town for noise and nuisance, to enter into an MOU with the town regarding public safety incidents, to have a responsible party at Royal Crest at all times, and to have all students undergo safe crossing training. Thank you.
We'll now hear from the floor. First from John Strauss from the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And then secondarily, so he'll be ready, is Christopher G. in the Affordable Housing Trust.
John Strauss, 23 Old Farm Road. I currently serve as the chairman of the town's Master Plan Implementation Committee. In advance of town meeting, the Town Master Plans Implementation Committee, the MPIC, recently completed a revised analysis of the proposed Royal Crest redevelopment with regard to how it aligns with the town's master plan that was adopted in 2018. For those who may not be aware, the MPIC is charged with tracking, educating the public about, and aiding the advancement of the recommendations set forth in the master plan. Our committee's evaluation process focused on determining which, if any, of the 103 total strategies set forth in the master plan were applicable to the proposed Royal Crest project. We then examined if aspects of the proposed project advanced the identified strategies, detracted from them, or did not contribute meaningfully to them based on a strictly objective analysis of the information provided to the committee. We identified 20 strategies that were applicable to this study. Of these, the MPIC determined that the proposed Royal Crest redevelopment project will have a positive impact on advancing 15 of the stated strategies of the 2018 master plan. Two additional strategies were found to have a neutral influence, meaning they were neither positive nor negative. The remaining 3 strategies we initially looked at were found no longer to be applicable based on the latest available information. It is important to note that the MPIC specifically did not make a determination for or against this project. The evaluation was solely intended to provide an objective analysis of the proposed project as to whether it advances strategies in the town's master plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. G.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone.
Please, you're going to have to get very close to the microphone.
Is this better?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris G. I reside at 154 High Street, and I'm the chair of the North Andover Affordable Housing Trust. I serve alongside 6 other resident volunteers who are committed to supporting the creation and preservation of affordable housing in North Andover. With our community support, our trust has been involved in various ways over the years. For example, by funding long and short-term rental assistance, down payment assistance, and home rehab assistance to low and moderate income residents. It's very possible that some of your friends, neighbors, and family members may have benefited from one of our programs at some point. What's clear in our experience is that there's always the need to support efforts that are done in a thoughtful and positive way of building a community that's even stronger than we are today. The proposed redevelopment of Royal Crest pledges, among other things, the creation of 97 housing units that will be attainable to households with low and moderate income families. The Trust has voted unanimously to recommend favorable action on warrant Article 80, 28, and 29 to support the addition of much-needed affordable housing in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we are now going to move to questions from the floor, not thinly disguised comments like in Congress ending up with a meaningless question, but real questions. And I will cut those off who are not asking real questions. We'll start on the left here.
Hi, I'm Karen Fugue, 517 Ray Street. So I understand that one of the objections to this is the police and fire department, and right now I know that takes a lot of our town's resources. I'm wondering what will be the impact on the police and fire department if this redevelopment goes forward?
Thank you very much. Is there somebody who can answer that question? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. During the fiscal impact report, it was studied, public safety as part of it. There was interviews that were done. The numbers that we're looking at actually are a little bit high because it is projections that were based on the January program, and that program was reduced by approximately 20%. However, we do know that there'll be about 667 new calls a year for police, 141 new calls a year for fire, and 219 new calls a year for EMS. The fiscal impact report proposes that between $120,000 and $360,000 per year impact to the budget, which is taken into account when they figure out that net new positive impact. When you're looking at it, between $120,000 and $360,000 is really about 1 to 4 new employees.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the right. We're going to do this for a half an hour or so and then take a measure of where we are at that point. Please.
Ron Carpenito, 34 West Woodbridge. 2 questions, Mr. Moderator. Follow up on the police. One question, fine. I'll go to this one. In 2007, when the economy shifted dramatically, the town next to us, Haverhill, experienced a lot of trouble with their new construction not being completed and everything having to shift. Are there assurances that if this is a long-term development and if the economy shifts very negatively, is this going to be completed or is it going to be stopped halfway through and we're left with a mess?
Thank you very much. Is there somebody that can attempt to answer that question? I would invite the developer, if in fact you can answer that question, please, and identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Jim Keefe, and I'm a principal at Trinity Financial. We're a 35-year-old development company.
Nice and close.
We've gone through 4 recessions. We have never started a project and not completed it.
Thank you very much. The next question to the left.
Hi, my name is Laura Kirkwood. I live at 58 Fernwood. My question is, we've heard that there's, the net revenue at full build-out, which is, 10 years away, of like $2 to $4 million. Do we know when that all comes on board? Like, how quickly do we actually see any revenue or just improvements in our status?
Thank you. I'll look, to the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, lady.
So looking at the phasing plan, it does look like in the first year they would bring on their student housing, the 40B building, 2 of the market rate buildings, and 3 of the separate retail establishments. They would also maintain 360 of their existing units. So taking into account the new development as well as the existing revenue and keeping the land value as where it is, because it is difficult to account for those land upgrades, that first phase revenue would be around $2.5 million. So at the lower end of the cost, we could start to see this break even in phase one. That does not include excise, meals tax, or hotels tax, or any real property, just real estate.
Thank you. Sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Andrew Furman, 5 Crossbow Lane.
Welcome.
Mr. Moderator, I'm curious, there's been a lot of discussion in the two agreements about financials. I'm really curious, one of the intriguing parts of this project is around the commercial space, retail, office, hotel. I'm curious if there are any projections on how much commercial tax revenue would be generated. I'm also curious about our master plan. Why do we recommend mixed use along the 114 corridor? And lastly, a unique aspect of this project puts us over the 10% threshold on the 40B. I'm curious if there's any projections, if we vote no here tonight, where other potential 40B projects could be. Thank you.
The gentleman snuck 2 questions in, but I didn't pick it up until he did it. So we'll allow, go ahead. It's quite all right. No.
So, Mr. Moderator, when we estimate proposed taxes and values, we're really doing it in a vacuum because we're looking at it in the year we are considering as well as the tax rate that we're considering. Numbers we're giving you are obviously going to be estimates. But based on those estimates, we know that the parking garages are estimated to bring in $174,000 worth of taxes. The office is estimated to bring in $414,000 worth of taxes. The retail is estimated to bring in $255,000 worth of taxes. The hotel is estimated to bring in $156,000 worth of taxes, and that's not including the hotel's tax. And then the rest of the taxes fall on the residential side.
Mr. Moderator,
Thank you very much.
The second part of the question or no?
Yes, be my guest.
So the second part of the second and third part of the question, 114 has been a corridor that the town and the planning department and planning board have been trying to develop over the last, 10, 15, 20 years with different kind of iterations of plans, and trying to use mixed use as that's a very sustainable type of growth because you have both residential and commercial kind of feeding off of each other. It's on a state highway and it's a connecting point between different towns. So that's on the 114. As to the 40B, the difficulty when you're in an under 10% position is it could be really anywhere in town. There are obviously limitations where someone would want to build because you want to have enough space to put in units, but there's really no set areas that would be off limits. So I think that's the best answer I can give you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the left.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Christina Herrickle, 1 Faulkner Road. I'd like someone from the school committee, school administration, to explain the impact of Royal Crest on the school population and whether the school renovations take into account for these added students from the project.
Question was directed to the school committee. They have no obligation to answer, but Dr. Mealy, please. Do you have his, John, do you have his presentation?
That was a tougher trip than I thought it would be. Could you just repeat the question? I couldn't hear you too well. The speakers go out that way.
My question was if you could explain the impact of the projected project on school population and whether the school renovations that are slated to happen take into account these projections.
Thank you. So when we look at enrollment projections, we look at 3 variables. One is birth rate, the other is new developments, and the third one is in and out migration into the town. So when we were doing our enrollment projections for the facilities master plan recommendation, we took all of those into account. What we are seeing is that the birth rate over the last 10 years has been about 37 students less than it was the previous 10 years. Developments have occurred that are adding population, but they're being offset by the decrease in the birth rate. So the projects that were added this evening, or were approved earlier this evening, add capacity of 450 students at our elementary and our middle school levels. So we certainly took into account this development. At the highest estimate, we would be about 100 students more than we've ever had at that development. But we have, like I said, we're seeing 37 students less per year in the birth rate, and we are adding 450 with the first two projects, and then additional capacity after that. So we are very confident.
Excuse me, Dr. Mealy?
Oops, sorry.
We're trying to sync up what you're saying with what's on the screen. So if somebody could hand him a clicker and he can do it himself, or
So yeah, here's the graph showing the birth rate for the previous 10 years.
tell us when you wish to move forward, okay?
And it's a difference of 369 students over that 10-year period. So that's 36.9 students per year less than we had been seeing. I don't know, what was the next one?
The next one.
So,
excuse me, excuse me. The moderator's in control of the meeting, and the gentleman was asked a question, and there is an answer. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sir, ladies and gentlemen, there are officers here, and I have the opportunity to ask you to accept you from the meeting. You are not recognized. I ask you to remain quiet until recognized. Please have some respect for everybody else in this room and in the annex room. Excuse me, Dr. Mealy, you were asked a question. Please continue answering.
This is not pertinent to that question, that slide. I will say that I think I have answered that question.
Thank you very much. Do we have another question? Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Michael Liss, 30 Leanne Drive. My question is if we say no, and Merrimack College, as they have indicated, will build their dorm on their campus, what would the financial impact to the town be of that move as other families would move into Royal Crest?
Does somebody have the capacity to answer that question?
I do, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you.
Just one moment, please. Mr. Moderator, I did run a scenario with Merrimack vacating. We do know that Merrimack College rents 135 units at Royal Crest, and it is estimated that another 50 to 110 are rented by students. So when I completed the analysis, I assumed that 50, and I used that number. So I assumed that 185 units would become available. Using the exact same criteria as the fiscal impact analysis, I determined that there would be 333 new residents that would take over those 185 apartments with 50 to 82 new students. Based on that analysis, there would be no increase in revenue. There would be an additional negative budget effect, and that would be from negative 182,000 to negative 278,000, which would bring the new net negative fiscal impact to negative 647,664 to negative 1.861 million.
Thank you very much. Do we have a query here?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Eli Adler-Roth, 114 Beverly Street. My pronouns are he and him. My question is in regards to the presentation, the counter presentation from the planning board member who, there's sort of a suggestion that MassDOT would not look at the implication of a project that wasn't approved. And I'm wondering if somebody can clarify if that means that they will not look at it yet. Is there any reason to believe that MassDOT would look at the traffic implications of a project if we vote yes tonight?
So of whom are you asking the question?
I would like to hear from the select board, I think, if they can clarify the position of MassDOT.
Okay, we'll ask. Anybody on this side? Please.
Mr. Moderator, I think that as a project gets permitted, we will certainly see MassDOT taking a greater interest in it. One of the things that we most clearly will see will be the MEPA process, and MassDOT is very intimately involved in that process. I have had experience where I've seen projects that have been built on state highways that were required to do $2+ million worth of work directly in front of their property, and basically addressing the traffic issues that way.
And Mr. Boynton, who made the comment, has a comment as well.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We had asked them if they had included it when they did the planning, and the answer was no. We did have a discussion, will you include it going forward? And I think their answer was pretty much, the planning is done. Now, if there's a possibility of somehow the state could do more, I suppose it's possible, but they have a many year-long planning process, and their answer to us was that part of the planning was done.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask, the other room can hear us. I understand that we've reestablished communication. Is there a direct question from the other room, or have you been directing people to this room? If you appreciate it.
Mr. Town Moderator, can you hear me? This is John.
Yes, we can, Mr. Fooey.
There's no question at this time from the annex room.
Thank you very much. Please interrupt us when you do have a query. To the right.
Hi, I'm Marianne Quint from 345 Blue Ridge. And my question is, what are some of the other possible outcomes for the land or the project if the zoning change doesn't go through tonight? Does it just stay
Be my
the
guest, if you can.
Right. I mean, I
Not
think
all questions can be answered. I'm sorry, but
do my best. Some of the things you could see is, again, we could go through. They vacate their station on site, so they would not do any improvements. It stays as is. Merrimack vacates, and we go through the scenario we just discussed. Another option would be a subdivision of the site in 240Bs on site, building by right. The possibilities are endless.
thank you very much. Another query?
Mr. Moderator,
Welcome.
I'm Geraldine Murphy at 1438 Great Pond Road. I'm questioning, there is, on 125, there's an enormous development that popped up in North Andover with a lot of housing and retail and restaurants, and it's an enormous project. I'm asking the boards, why is North Andover even considering another project which is 4 or 5 times as large as the one on 125?
Thank you very much. I don't know, Mr. Chairman.
Well, as you heard, and I'll speak on behalf of the planning board, there are members of the planning board, the majority that would agree that said that this project is too big. So there's a majority of our board that agreed with that position. But all of the members of our board, I think, were in favor of the idea of this project. So I'll talk about that. And some of the reasons that I spoke about earlier why someone might be in favor is you talk about the Princeton properties, that's that development. That one's pretty much at capacity in terms of lack of vacancies. So there is still a need for additional housing. The size, the scope, those are the questions, but the need for housing, the financial benefits, all the other things that kind of I mentioned about why someone might be for, those are real. The question, and as I said, why this board ultimately voted against was the size and the scope, but the need for new units is certainly there.
Thank you. We'll go to the right, sir.
Stan Novak, 26 Pembroke Road. I don't suppose I get more than one question?
One question.
Where is Boxford's giant apartment complex?
Thank you for your comment. Do we have a query on the left?
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Watson, 30 Huckleberry Lane.
Welcome.
Thank you. I have a question about the projections, and I'm trying to understand how realistic they are.
If you could bring that closer to your, thank you.
Sure. I'd like to ask, if you apply the formula that was used to generate the Wegman report estimate of the impact on the schools to the current Royal Crest development, excluding the units that are leased by Merrimack College, how does that compare to the 213 students that were used in your analysis?
So I think that's a question, Dr. Mealy, be my guest.
So if you look at the Royal Crest development is 52 years old now, and those formulas are designed for new developments under current conditions, market rate apartments, and that doesn't apply to Royal Crest anymore. If you look at the numbers of enrolled students we have each year, this is how they play out. 164, 146. So if you looked at this last year, you'd think that model is right on. 209, 194, 198, 227, and 207. It is, with Woodridge, our most transient population. They come in and out very quickly from both of those developments. So the model after 52 years does not apply.
So could you just answer my question?
Excuse me. Please, unhelpful. I'll allow a follow-up.
Did you calculate the Wegman formula for today's mix of Royal Crest units? And if so, what was your result? More, less, or the same as the 213?
If you use that formula, which is not applicable to Royal Crest as it is today, you would get about 140, low 140 students from that population. We had 146 last year. We have 213 to start the year. We are now at 164 into the year. So the population there is in flux. It's, like I said, the most transient population we have. The conditions don't apply to that development as it exists today to use that model.
Sir, if I may
Thank you.
just
I'm
one
sorry,
more
no.
clarifying question.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Ann Gray. I live on Rosedale Ave.
Welcome.
And this question is for Peter Boynton. The cumulative traffic report that the Select Board quoted, was that complete? And does it include peak times?
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear the...
Does it include peak times?
Peak times. Thank you very much. Peter.
I also didn't hear the last part. Does it
include peak times?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have that traffic study in front of me right now, and we did do a whole of town. The town did do, well, it's not a whole of town, but it's a number of intersections across town outside of the Royal Crest corridor. I think the town manager had that displayed. When the consultant came and briefed us on it, some members of the planning board, myself included, had a concern about how the calculations were done. The consultant told us that they had averaged peak and non-peak in both directions. And the question that was put back to the consultant is, if you look at how the math works, isn't that going to reduce the peak values because of how you're averaging it? And can you come back to us with just the peak times? And the analogy we used was the big impact for traffic is when you're trying to get somewhere in the flow of traffic during peak. If I'm on the other side of the road going in the other direction, I'm not that concerned because that's not where the traffic is. And the consultant agreed and said they would come back to us with another answer, and we haven't heard it yet.
Thank you very much. To the left.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Julian Liebeck.
Welcome.
7 Fernview. this is to the planning board in general, but Mr. Boynton might be able to speak to it. Did we commission any studies or did we look at the impact to our community if this migrates to one of the 4 or 5 towns that may be accepting of this project? Because it sounds like if that moves to Middleton, those 14,000 cars are still going to be going up and down 114, and I'm still going to be burdened trying to get to Stop and Shop, but I'm not going to have any tax revenue. So what did we do to assure that either it's not going across the town line and we're going to miss out on all the money, and what did we do to assure that we are not going to have this migrate to a town that would be accepting of it? And now we're taking on all of this burden, losing out on the population, losing out on the increase that will make new development under 40B still
We're getting dangerously close to making a comment.
Sorry.
So I will allow, you've directed it to Mr. Boynton, I'll allow him to answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Not to my knowledge, we did not ask what would happen if this development went to another town, and I think the reason we didn't ask that is we were more focused about what's happening in this town, and if this development doesn't come here, there's a number of people on the planning board who are optimistic that we'd have potentially a better proposal that would fit.
Thank you.
Al Delgado, 39 Rosedale Ave. My question, Mr. Moderator, has to do with water use. The study Mr. Boynton referenced is very concerning. And when the Select Board did their presentation, they presented a different picture. Can somebody explain that discrepancy?
Mr. Moderator, can I comment on that?
Please, first opportunity to the left.
Sure, thank you. So I actually have a copy of this 13-page report in front of me, and the Selectmen's report was accurate. They are correctly and accurately referring to one of the tables on this report. The reason that it's confusing is because, and please bear with me, that what they're doing is showing a graph of what the permitted allowed amount of water that can be drawn from the lake. And that's under a state permit. It says, I think it's 4.4 million gallons a day, I'm pretty sure. And so that is showing how that permitted draw from the lake is projected to change year to year. That graph that the selectmen showed is absolutely out of the report. And quite frankly, when I started looking at this report, that's what I was looking at. And to me, it was reassurance that, gee, it looks we're okay. But when I read the words, especially the 16 recommendations, I came away with a very different understanding. So my criticism, if anything, is I think this report is not well done.
And do we have a comment from the table?
Mr. Moderator, we do have members of DPW here that I'm sure would be happy to speak to our water capacity.
I'm sorry.
We do have members of DPW here who I'm sure would be happy, including our DPW director, our town engineer, our scientists.
Question was asked. We have an expert on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. The 4.4 million gallons per day, that's an average. If you look during the summer, there are days that we go well over 7.5 million gallons per day. So I think what the Select Board was referring to is that when you look at 27 million gallons as what would be the average, that's a blip. I think we do about 1.1 billion gallons per year in total use. So I think that's what the Select Board was referring to. Again, I think Mr. Boynton, relative to conservation, yes, a lot in the report talks about conservation. And you'll hear us talk a lot about we really need to reduce the irrigation use in town, but the potable use, which is supplying to homes, the households, we have sufficient for that.
Thank you very much. I think that question was on the right.
Diane Sakari, 15 Royal Crest Drive.
Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I do want to say one thing. Royal Crest people who live there, we are residents of North Andover.
Yes, you are, and you are welcome.
You make us feel like we're not.
Question, please.
My question is, as a resident of Royal Crest, you're not protecting us. We don't want to live in a construction site. They're going to send a coordinator in. Where are we going to live? Have you done anything to protect that we get to stay in North Andover? I have children in the school here. I don't want to have to move them out. I have a junior who's going to be a senior, a freshman who's going to be a sophomore. They're in band. My daughter, because of the great education, scored a 1550 on her SATs. That's how good this school is. I don't want to have to uproot my children and take them out. People at Royal Crest don't migrate. Our children graduate. My daughter went to college.
You've asked a question. We're going to go to the question.
I want to know what's going to protect us. Who is going in this town to protect us?
Ma'am, you've asked a question. We'll try to endeavor to get an answer for you specifically. I believe I recollect a mitigation circumstance in your presentation.
Yes, so the developer has laid out a phasing plan, and as part of that plan, they're using their existing units that are going to stay online, as well as not filling units that are going to be vacated through attrition in order to keep Royal Crest residents on the site.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh, please, it's important because you're saying that we get to stay on site in the middle of a construction site, paying market rent. What is to protect us? Our cars, our children getting run over? Who is going to protect us? That's not good enough. And what
Thank
about...
you.
No,
Thank
what
you.
about the fact that
I can get you an answer to that question. I'm going to get you an answer to that question. I'm going to ask the planning board if in fact a special permit were allowed, what mitigation and or protections might you be able to afford, if any?
Sure. So, very good question, point. In terms of construction, all special permits or permits under this project, which are not necessarily called special permits, do have construction rules, regulations, timing, phasing, all of those things are baked into it. So those kind of questions, like the actual specifics, would be addressed if it passed as part of the permitting process in terms of location, times, things like that, questions about property, is there places to store cars and things like that. Those are all fair points that would be a part of the permitting process.
Thank
and
you
a
very
guarantee we get to stay in North Andover?
I think that's part of the plan that Melissa referred to. I mean, it was literally in the...
I'd like to see that in
Thank you,
writing
ma'am.
on the warrant.
Sure.
We have a question on the right.
We should put that up, though.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tony Capichetti, 55 Lyman Road.
Welcome.
I'm a member of the Conservation Commission, but speaking as a private citizen. There were a lot of numbers thrown out, and some of the metrics were a little bit confusing, as evidenced by the water usage of 27 million gallons a year versus 4.4 billion gallons a year. My question gets to, we're talking about a 330% increase in space. However, looking at these slides, we're talking, almost 13 acres of parking that is structured. What is the total open space proposed versus existing? Because that's more of a metric that people would understand. How much of this facility would be left in green space versus what it's currently as green space?
I think that was presented in the presentations, and we have a recollection.
Did have it. How much?
The facts folks are putting their heads together in order to answer your question.
Thank you. In the comparison slide. Yes, open space.
Open space, fourth up from the bottom.
Open space, so in the proposed is 46.5 acres.
Versus,
Yeah, it goes 54.6 to 46.5 acres.
So it's about a 10 or 20% decrease, not a 330% increase.
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Sir?
Bruce Barclay, 55 Stonecleve Road. I have a question for Select Board Member Smedili. At the Select Board's advisory vote on this proposal, she voted no. Could she elaborate on her primary reasons for that vote?
She may. Rosemary?
Thank you. As I've been listening to the questions going back and forth, I've been taking notes of things that perhaps were not talked about. So for the sake of the time of it is and the length of the meeting, I'm going to try to be as quick and right to the point as possible, but thank you for the question. So as one of my chief concerns is the traffic. It's the quality of life of the people of North Andover. I've said this before. I'll pick the red card. That's what our town looks like on a map. It's a rectangle. And 114 starts in Middleton and goes all the way to Lawrence. It does shoot over, the road does shoot over towards Haverhill on 125. You can go around the other end of 125 and go to Reading. It is the main road in town. So when this traffic hits, and it's going to hit, with the students having the buttons to cross in different locations on 114, with the construction traffic, it is going to absolutely affect the quality of life for the people of North Andover. They will be cutting through all of our streets to get around town. That means Hillside Road, Chestnut. It means Milk Street if they're heading over to the old center. They'll be going down Johnson. They'll be going on Ray Street. They'll be going on Marble Ridge. And a lot of it is going to probably flow right back into the old center, going down Andover Street. We're seeing traffic already building up on Mass Ave. That's a quality of life issue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No, I have more, please.
The gentleman is satisfied. He just said thank you to you.
Mr. Moderator.
You need another minute?
Another minute and I will...
You're welcome to another minute.
Thank you.
Be my
Very
guest.
good. Another concern that I have is when you look at the project at the senior center, how tall those buildings are. These buildings are going to be 25 feet taller. I'm concerned with that and other projects. This will become a precedent for the town of North Andover, where developers are going to come in and buy and build tall properties that don't fit in with what we're looking for.
All right. Are we ready?
And no, one more. This is the most important. The abutters to this property, all of them, including the Franklin School, will be living in a construction zone for 8 to 10 years. Ask yourself, if you lived there, would you vote for this? You know,
excuse me, no colloquy here. Please answer the question.
Oh, me? It wasn't me. When North Andover has been through tough times the last few years, I have never been so proud of our town employees. We bonded together. Our children have been through the worst of times with the COVID and the masks and everything. We don't want to hurt any more children. We don't want to hurt any more families. Let's put a better project on the books.
Mr. Moderator. Folks, let's be respectful to the next questioner, and then we're going to have a discussion amongst ourselves. Sir.
Hey, Mr. Moderator, Joe Lynch, 18 Catuit Street.
Please. The gentleman is trying to speak. Sir.
Joe Lynch, 18 Catuit Street. I, too, am a member of the North Andover Conservation Commission, a relatively new member for 28 years. But 30 years ago, this body passed a bylaw, sweeping wetlands bylaw, unique to the state at the time, but now many across the state have followed our stead. The reality is our bylaw works in a more strict fashion than the State Wetlands Protection Act. The question is specific to permitting thresholds. The section that's 40B wrests control from local boards and commissions and lets one comprehensive permit be issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals. This bylaw, I think, is less clear, at least certainly in presentation, when other boards and commissions have the opportunity to review it. Does this bylaw negate our Wetlands Protection Act and our local wetlands bylaw, which part of the master plan sketch of the colored slides we've seen would in fact be in local jurisdictional wetlands and would not otherwise be permitted?
Thank you for the specific question, and we can ask our experts at the table here.
So the answer to that is no. We'd still have to go through the same process.
You got a very specific answer.
No to the bylaw, but the 40B portion would still be exempt under 40B.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have 10 or 11 people still in line. Are we... You'll allow? It's 9:50. Have we heard enough? I'm going to ask an advisory question. And that advisory question is that if you would like to move to a vote, please raise your red card. Thank you. You may put them down. If you would like to hear further questions and or commentary thereafter, please raise your red card. Okay. I think we're pretty ready. I want to thank everybody for standing up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Willis. I'm sorry, Mr. Willis. We are clearly ready for... Sir, I'd invite you to sit down, please. Sir, I'd invite you to sit down. Thank you for your courtesy. I appreciate it. We have 1,600 people here who are ready to take an action. And the cafeteria is ready as well. Sir, I'm going to invite you to sit down. Please, please. Can I ask? I'm sorry. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're ready for the question. We have a motion in front of us, a positive motion for Article 28. I'm going to ask for those who are in favor of the motion in support of Article 28 to raise their red card. Please keep them up and ask the folks in the other room if John has a reasonable... John, are you ready in the other room? Do you have a sense of your room? Mr. Fooey?
I don't know that there's any issue, but that is checked.
Okay. All right, you're welcome to put your cards down. All those who are opposed to the motion made in Article 28, please raise your red card. Just keep, please keep your card up. We're checking on the other room. You may put your cards down, and I'd ask your patience for a few minutes.
Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Fooey. So you have a sense of your room?
I think we're going to need a vote.
So it's close in your room.
Well, it's close enough.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a call, considering the other room is essentially 50-50. I think that this room is slightly not in favor, or perhaps even significantly not in favor of the article. Hold on. So that is my judgment, that the article does not pass. However, we will have a counted vote if 7 people doubt my ruling that the article does not pass. So if 7 people were to stand, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You'll excuse me.
People standing here in this room.
Ladies and gentlemen, we operate under rules in town meeting, and 7 people having stood who doubt my ruling means we will have a hand-counted vote. So at this moment, I invite all the tellers to get to their sections. For those in favor in both rooms, please raise your banded hand and your red card. Only those in favor, and we will do a count.
Janice, we good?
These are no longer. Can you delete yours before that got it deleted? I'm not going to delete mine. I don't. Oh, you don't want to. I'm just going to go down to 15 and stop. Yeah, but then they're going to ask about the section. Yeah, that's kind of Yeah. So what am I doing? 15 onwards? You want to delete 14 to 19. And 12 is not open. 12 is not? Okay. Yeah, let's hide it. Can I hide mine? You hide mine. Just open anything. Yeah, I don't get it. I said you I feel bad. Yeah, it's all right.
Are the counters ready? So I'm going to ask the counters to come up to the microphones, please. And we're just counting yes votes. May I have section 1? 31. Section 2. 24. Section 3. Thank you for the speed walk. 32. Section 4.
Section 4, 37 yay.
Say it again, please.
37, section 4.
37. Thank you very much. Section 5.
Section 5, 39.
39. Section 6.
Section 6, 25.
25. Section 7.
34.
34. Section 8.
Section 8, 5.
5. 5. Section 9.
37.
37. Thank you. Section 10.
35.
35. Section 11.
43.
43. Section 13.
From the cafeteria.
Cafeteria.
44.
44 in favor, thank you. And the stage?
21.
I'm sorry?
21.
Thank you, 21. Okay, so we'll now move to those who are not in favor of the motion to please raise your card with your banded hand, and we will do a count. Thank you. Well, I appreciate it, thank you.
Say 5. Say 5. Yeah.
Sorry. Are you done? Okay.
We got you.
Thank you.
Keep your hand.
Please keep your cards up until instructed by the tellers to put them down.
I'm like trying to keep in on people who, but it's really hard to tell who's.
Maybe in the future. And I would have said that too.
While the count is still continuing, I ask people to remain in their seats until we start announcing the votes, please. Just so those neighbors of ours who are volunteers and acting as tellers have an unobstructed view to be able to make an accurate count.
Did you count this?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If I may ask the tellers to come forward. I see that you've been instructed to all put your hands down. Okay. Section 1, the no vote.
66.
66. Section 2.
56.
56. Thank you very much. Section, no outbursts. Section 3. It's quite all right?
135.
135. Section 4.
157.
157. Please, folks. Section 5.
Section 536.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the number.
36.
36. Thank you. Section 6.
40.
40. Section 7.
67.
67. Section 8.
Section 8, 28.
28. Section 9.
55.
55. Section 10.
112.
112. Section 11.
32.
32. Section 13, the cafeteria.
67.
67. And the stage. 5. Ladies and gentlemen. The motion, we still have business to conduct. The motion does not pass. I thank you. We still have business to conduct, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for affirming my judgment that the article did not pass, but it was important that we go through that step. We have 2 more items to discuss that are material in front of us, so I ask you, if you are exiting, to please be quiet. Please be quiet. The first thing that I want to note is that I have no doubt in my mind that every vote cast in this last article was cast in good faith by every party who made a judgment. And I don't want to thank the town for that. We are now going to move to Article 28.
Mr. Moderator? Mr. Moderator?
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
Ted Tripp, 262 Boston Street, North Andover.
You have a point of order, sir?
No, I'd like to move to reconsider Article 28.
But that's unnecessary in order for us to do this at this moment in time. Unnecessary. We're going to wrap the meeting quickly. Sir.
Mr. Moderator.
Article 28.
Article
Ladies and
29.
gentlemen.
Mr. Moderator, as to Article 29, the Planning Board would move to withdraw Article 29.
Article 29.
Second, John, you want to second that? Second.
We have a comment from the Planning Board that they would like to make.
We just wanted to thank everyone for coming to vote on these articles. There was a lot of debate before tonight and tonight, and we appreciate everyone's time and effort and energies in making educated and informed decisions and doing it as an elected body. So thank you all.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our penultimate article. We have one small piece of business, but important for us, in order to properly close out the meeting and make sure that your votes truly counted. I first wish to give thanks to the town clerk, Dawn Warren, and her extraordinary staff, the volunteer tellers, the town IT director, John Highland, and the North Andover Community Access Director, Brian Frazier, and his staff, our head teller and emergency management director, Jeff Coco, assistant superintendent, Dr. Mealy, and lead custodian, Steve Langlois, for suffering me in the setup of this meeting, and his many colleagues, please, and the many dozens of others who have helped out. The very act of conducting this meeting is a fitting way to begin our 376th year as a community. I thank you for the generally respectful debate, the civility that was afforded to each of us, and the effort you have made to contribute as legislators today. The final motion of the night is made by the chair of the board of the Select Board.
Mr. Moderator, I move that this 2020 annual town meeting be dissolved.
The motion to dissolve, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, raise your card. The meeting is dissolved. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Noble.
We do everything. We follow every motion. Yes. Peter made the motion. John
I second. Yeah.
Yeah. That Rover would be perfect. I drive through there every day going from my house to Fiscal or Cable in my offices. I want a rotary there. I hate sitting waiting. Rotary would be awesome there. Yeah, I know. Yeah.